They rejected him on the night he needed them most. The Alpha King who conquered 5 kingdoms before his 25th birthday stood bleeding in his own throne room while his people called him monster. Power had made him untouchable. Betrayal made him human again. This is the story of a ruler who learned that the crown reveals what men truly are when everything burns. Stay until the end because this gets darker than you think. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments so I know my tribe is watching. The marble floors of the throne room still held bloodstains from the last execution when Lucy Ian Vadrake realized his entire court wanted him dead. Not the obvious death, not assassination, the kind of death that happens slowly while you still breathe, the death of legitimacy, the death of trust, the death of everything that makes a crown worth wearing. He stood before the Council of Alphas, 27 regional lords dressed in ceremonial armor that had never seen actual war. Their scent filled the chamber, expensive oils, old wine, fear masked as confidence. They had requested this emergency session 3 hours after midnight, which meant they wanted him off balance, sleep-deprived, vulnerable. Lucien gave them nothing. His posture remained carved from stone, black silk shirt open at the collar. No crown. He never wore the crown unless he was about to kill someone. The message was simple. I rule because I can rip your throat out, not because of some metal circle. Lord Varric Mordain spoke first. He always spoke first. 60 years old with a beard like iron wire and eyes that had watched 3 kings rise and fall. His daughter Celestine stood behind him in a dress the color of dried blood. She watched Lucien the way a jeweler watches a diamond they plan to steal. Varric's voice rolled through the chamber like distant thunder. Your Majesty, we gather tonight because the Empire stands on the edge of collapse. Malachar Thorn has burned 17 noble estates in 3 months, entire bloodlines erased. And still, you refuse to take a Luna. Lucian let the silence stretch until it hurt. Then he smiled. Not the kind of smile that reaches eyes, the kind that shows teeth. I refuse to chain myself to a political arrangement while we're at war, he said. His voice carried the flat certainty of a man who had stopped explaining himself years ago. Every Luna candidate you people shove in front of me smells like ambition wearing perfume. I won't tie my bloodline to a house that sees the throne as a ladder. Lord Brennan, younger than Varric, but twice as hungry, stepped forward. His scent spiked with aggression barely held in check. With respect, Your Majesty, you mistake strategy for weakness. A king without a Luna is a king without legitimacy. The old laws demand... Lucien moved. Not an attack, just a shift in weight. A reminder that he had killed men for less than interrupting him. Brennan's words died in his throat. Sweat appeared on his upper lip. The old laws, Lucien said quietly, were written by men who never had to choose between their mate bond and their kingdom's survival. Tell me, Lord Brennan, which of your 3 daughters did you want me to breed with? The one who poisoned her first husband, or the one who tortured servants for entertainment? Brennan's face went purple. Behind him, other council members shifted, uncomfortable, caught between fear of Lucien and resentment of the truth. Lady Oriana Ashwin, eldest of the regional matriarchs, raised one thin hand. Her voice cut through the tension like a knife through silk. Enough posturing. We all know what this is about. Every noble family in this empire has bled trying to defend their territories while you centralize all military power in the capital. We provide armies. You provide delays. We send our sons to die. You send us excuses written on expensive paper. Lucien turned to her slowly. Oriana did not flinch. She had survived 4 regime changes and 2 civil wars. Fear had stopped working on her decades ago. Your grandson died defending the northern pass, Lucien said. His tone shifted. Still hard, but something underneath it now. Something that might have been respect. He held that choke point for 6 hours against a force 3 times his size. I personally retrieved his body and sent it home with full honors. Don't stand here and tell me I don't value sacrifice. Oriana's eyes glittered. Then show us you understand what sacrifice means. Take a Luna, produce an heir. Give this empire something to believe in besides your ability to kill. The words landed like stones in deep water. Ripples spread through the assembled lords. Lucien felt it. The shift. This was not a request. This was an ultimatum wrapped in formal language. He had spent 10 years building an empire through pure force of will. conquered territories that had been at war for generations, united bloodlines that hated each other, created order from chaos using nothing but violence and precision and the absolute certainty that he would do whatever it took to survive. And now these soft-bellied parasites wanted him to play house, while an army of rogue wolves burned the empire from the edges inward. Varric stepped forward again. This time his voice carried something new. Not aggression, finality. Your Majesty, we have discussed this matter at length. The Council has voted. If you do not select a Luna and formalize a political bond within 30 days, we will invoke the ancient right of dissolution. The Council will elect a new Alpha King. The throne room went silent. That kind of silence has weight, the kind that presses against your chest and makes breathing difficult. Lucien looked at each of them in turn, reading their sense, their micro-expressions, the way they held their bodies. Varric believed every word he had just spoken. Brennan practically vibrated with barely contained excitement. Oriana looked tired, sad even, but she would vote against him anyway. They were serious. A coup dressed up as bureaucracy. Lucien laughed, not a nervous laugh, not a strategic laugh, a genuine sound of dark amusement that made several council members step backward. You want to invoke ancient law? He said. His voice dropped to something barely above a whisper, the kind of whisper that makes people lean in even though every instinct screams to run. Fine. I invoke the right of selection. 1 month from tonight, I will host a gathering of every eligible Luna candidate in the Empire. I will choose my mate in front of this entire court. And when I do, every single one of you will kneel and accept whoever I pick. No council votes, no political negotiations. Just me. My choice. My crown. The room erupted. Lords shouted over each other, some in triumph, some in outrage. Varric looked like he had bitten into spoiled meat. This was not what they wanted. They wanted control. Lucien had just promised them chaos. Lady Oriana alone remained silent. She watched him with something that might have been pity, because she understood what the others did not. A cornered alpha is the most dangerous thing in the world. Lucien walked out of that council chamber knowing he had just signed away the last piece of freedom he owned. The crown demanded blood. Always blood. Sometimes it was your enemy's. Sometimes it was your own. Tonight it felt like both. The hallways stretched before him like arteries carved from stone. Guards snapped to attention as he passed. Servants melted into doorways. Everyone knew when the king was in a killing mood. His scent broadcast it like a war drum, rage and something darker, something that tasted like despair wearing armor. He climbed the tower stairs to his private chambers. Each step felt heavier than the last. By the time he reached the top, his hands were shaking. Not from fear, from the effort of not destroying everything in reach. His chambers overlooked the capital. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city sprawling below like a jeweled wound. Marble towers, fortress walls, thousands of lives dependent on his ability to keep pretending he knew what he was doing. Lucien poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey. Drank it standing at the window. Felt the burn all the way down, but it did not touch the cold thing living in his chest. A knock at the door. He did not turn. Come in, Kael. The door opened, closed. Footsteps crossed the chamber. Kael Arden stood beside him at the window, silent for a long moment. That was one of the things Lucien valued most about his commander. Kael understood when silence was the only honest language left. They told you about the ultimatum, Lucien said. It was not a question. Kael nodded. The council is terrified. Malachar is winning and they need someone to blame. You are convenient. Lucien laughed, a sound like glass breaking. Convenient. That's one word for it. You could actually choose someone, Kael said quietly. Find a Luna who is strong enough to stand beside you. It does not have to be a cage. Everyone wants to believe that. Lucien drained his glass. Set it down harder than necessary. But I have seen what happens to rulers who let themselves be vulnerable. My father loved my mother more than anything in this world. When she died, he went mad. Started a war that killed thousands. Burned entire cities looking for someone to blame. By the time I put him down, he had become exactly the kind of monster he swore to destroy. That is not going to happen to you. How do you know? Because you are not him. Lucien turned, looked at his oldest friend, his only friend, if he was being honest. Kael had fought beside him since they were 15, bled with him, killed for him, never once asked for anything except the chance to keep fighting. "What if I am?" Lucien asked. "What if the only thing keeping me from becoming a monster is the fact that I refuse to care about anyone?"
"Then you're already lost," Kael said. His voice carried no judgment, just truth. A man who refuses to feel anything is not strong. He is just afraid. And fear makes us dangerous in all the wrong ways. The words landed like a blade between ribs. Lucien wanted to argue, wanted to rage, wanted to prove Kael wrong. But he could not. Because deep down, in the parts of himself he refused to acknowledge, he knew his commander was right.
"Get some sleep," Kael said. "The selection is in 4 weeks. You need to be ready." He left without waiting for a response. Lucien stood alone in chambers that suddenly felt too large and too empty. He looked out at his empire, all that power, all that control, and still he felt like a man standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for the moment when the ground beneath him finally gave way. In the distance, thunder rolled across the mountains. Storm coming, always another storm. 3 weeks later, Serafina Vale stepped off a transport cart into the capital city and immediately understood why people called it the Marble Fist. Everything here looked like it was built to intimidate. Towers that scraped low-hanging clouds, walls thick enough to house entire families, streets paved with stones so precisely cut they seemed unnatural. Even the air felt different, heavier, like breathing in authority itself. She pulled her travel cloak tighter and tried not to stare like some village idiot. Around her, dozens of other young women moved through the city gates in clusters of expensive fabric and calculated confidence. Luna candidates from every major house. They traveled with servants and guards and enough luggage to supply a small war. They looked at Serafina the way you look at something stuck to your shoe. She carried one bag. No servants, no family escort. Just her and a letter of introduction from House Ashwin that Lady Oriana had written in her own blood as a formal guarantee. Serafina was not technically noble. Her mother had been a healer. Her father had died defending borders nobody in the capital cared about. But her grandmother had been Ashwin bloodline, which meant she qualified. Barely. Her hands shook as she joined the line at the inner checkpoint. Not from fear, from exhaustion. The journey from the forest territories had taken 8 days on roads that barely deserved the name. She had slept in barns and eaten stale bread and walked until her feet bled inside her boots. But she was here. Lady Oriana's final words echoed in her memory. Your bloodline carries something ancient, something dangerous. If you do not learn to control it, it will control you. The king needs a Luna who can survive what is coming, not just politically, literally. Serafina still did not understand what that meant. But 3 months ago, her wolf had emerged beneath a crimson moon and the entire forest had bowed. Trees bent, animals fled. The air itself seemed to recognize something in her blood that she did not yet comprehend. That night had changed everything. Now she stood in a city that looked like it wanted to eat her alive, surrounded by women who would kill for the chance she had been given. A city guard stopped her at the checkpoint. Young, maybe 20. He looked at her worn boots and faded cloak and sneered. Name and house, Serafina Vale. House Ashwin sponsorship. He checked his list, checked it again, then looked at her like she had just told him she was secretly a fish. You're the forest girl? The one who triggered her wolf shift 3 months ago? That's me. The guard's sneer shifted into something uglier, curiosity mixed with contempt. Let me see it. See what? Your wolf. Everyone's talking about it. They say it came out red. Unnatural. Serafina felt her jaw tighten. My wolf is not a circus act. The guard stepped closer. His scent spiked with aggression and something else. Something that made her skin crawl. I'm not asking, forest girl. I'm telling you. Shift. Now. Or I mark you as suspicious and you don't get into the city. Other candidates were watching now. Entertained, waiting to see the country girl humiliated. Serafina took a slow breath. Her wolf stirred inside her chest. Angry. Ready to teach this fool a lesson about respect. But before she could respond, a voice cut through the checkpoint like a blade through butter. Stop! Everyone turned. A man stood 10 feet away. Tall, scarred, built like violence wrapped in discipline. He wore the black and silver uniform of the Royal Guard with casual authority. A commander's insignia marked his collar. His eyes were the color of winter ice. Cale Arden. Everyone in the Empire knew that name. The King's Wolf. The man who had personally led 16 successful campaigns and never lost a single battle. Rumor said he had killed his first enemy at 14 and never stopped counting. The checkpoint guard went pale. Commander, I was just... Cale's expression did not change. You were abusing your authority to humiliate a sponsored candidate. Get back to your post before I have you reassigned to latrine duty for the next decade. The guard practically ran. Kyle turned to Serafina. His gaze moved over her in 2 seconds. Assessing. Not the way men usually looked at women. The way a soldier evaluates another soldier. You're the Ashwin girl. It was not a question. Serafina lifted her chin. I am. Your wolf really red? Yes. Cale nodded slowly. Good. That means you're either very powerful or very cursed. Either way, you'll need to be dangerous to survive here. He gestured toward the inner city. Welcome to the capital. Try not to die in the first week. Then he walked away. Serafina stood there, bag in hand, surrounded by marble towers and hostile stares, and the sudden crushing awareness that she had just stepped into something far bigger and far darker than she had imagined. Behind her, one of the noble candidates laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Poor thing. She actually thinks she has a chance. The palace was a monument to controlled paranoia. Serafina spent her first 3 days wandering halls that seemed designed to confuse and intimidate in equal measure. Everything was marble and gold and menace. Guards stood at every intersection. Servants moved through the corridors like ghosts, eyes down, mouths shut. Other candidates clustered in designated common areas, forming alliances and spreading poison disguised as gossip. Nobody spoke to Serafina, which was fine. She had not come here to make friends. The accommodations provided for candidates reflected their status. Noble houses got suites overlooking gardens. Second-tier families got comfortable rooms in the East Wing. Serafina got a converted storage chamber in the servants' quarters with one narrow window and a bed that smelled like mildew. She did not complain. Complaining implied you expected better. Expectation was a luxury she could not afford. On the second night, she ventured into the common dining hall where candidates gathered for the evening meal. The room fell silent when she entered. 50 pairs of eyes tracked her movement from door to table. She could smell their contempt, sweet perfume covering rotten curiosity. A girl with silver blonde hair and a dress worth more than Serafina's entire village laughed as she passed. I heard she sleeps with the servants. How fitting. Another candidate, dark-haired and sharp-featured, joined in. Someone should tell her this is a selection, not a charity auction. Serafina kept walking, filled her plate with bread and cheese and dried meat, found a corner table away from the clusters of noble cruelty. She was halfway through her meal when someone sat across from her. Celestine Mordain. Serafina recognized her immediately. Everyone did. Varric Mordain's daughter, the most politically connected candidate in the entire selection. She looked like something carved from ice and ambition, perfect bone structure, perfect posture, perfect smile that meant absolutely nothing. You must be Serafina, Celestine said. Her voice sounded like honey poured over broken glass. The forest girl everyone is talking about. Serafina set down her bread. That's me. Celestine tilted her head. Studying. I'm curious about something. Why did you come here? You must know you have no real chance. The king will choose a Luna from established bloodlines. Someone with political value. Someone trained for this role. Maybe I came to prove something. To whom? Myself. Celestine smiled. How wonderfully naive. Let me give you some advice, forest girl. The moment you walked through those gates, you became a target. Every woman in this palace sees you as either a threat or a joke. The smart ones see you as both. And the king? She leaned forward. He eats girls like you for breakfast and uses the bones as toothpicks. Serafina met her gaze without flinching. If he is that monstrous, why do you want him? Celestine's smile widened. Because monsters are useful when you know how to control them. A king who feels nothing is a king you can manipulate. A king who loves is a king with weaknesses. You want a puppet, not a partner. I want power, Celestine said simply. Everything else is just decoration.
She stood, smoothed her dress. Think about what I said. Save yourself the humiliation. Leave before the selection. Go back to your forest and your simple life. Nobody here will miss you.
She walked away. Serafina sat alone in that dining hall, surrounded by whispered laughter and hostile stares, and felt something harden inside her chest. Not anger, determination. These people thought she was weak because she came from nowhere, because she had no titles or political connections or expensive dresses. They were about to learn a very painful lesson. Weakness is not about where you come from. It is about what you are willing to become when survival demands it. On the fourth night, Serafina found the training arena by accident. She had been wandering the palace again, mapping exits and guard rotations out of pure instinct. Her father had been a soldier. He taught her that survival meant always knowing 3 ways out of any room. The habit stuck. A narrow staircase hidden behind a tapestry, stone steps leading down into darkness, sound echoing from below, steel on steel, grunting, impact. She descended carefully. The arena sprawled beneath the palace like a secret heart, ancient, brutal. Blood had soaked into the sand over centuries until the ground itself looked rust-colored. Torches burned in iron sconces, casting shadows that moved like living things. The air smelled like sweat and violence and old pain. 2 men fought in the center ring. No, not fought. One man destroyed the other while a crowd of royal guards watched in silence. Lucian Vaidrake moved like controlled catastrophe. Serafina had never seen the king before. Not in person. But she knew him instantly. He fought shirtless, every muscle in his body designed for damage. Sweat-slicked skin covered in scars that told stories of battles survived through sheer refusal to die. His movements were not elegant. They were efficient, brutal, precise. He was not sparring. He was venting something that looked like rage-wearing skin. His opponent, a guard twice his size, tried desperately to defend himself and failed. Lucien broke the man's guard with 3 strikes, put him on the ground with a 4th, then stood over him, breathing hard, fists still clenched. The fallen guard was not moving. "Enough," a voice called. Cale Arden stepped into the ring. He looked at the unconscious man. "Get him to the medic, now." 2 soldiers dragged their comrade away. Lucien turned, saw Kael. Something in his posture shifted, still dangerous but less feral. "You came to lecture me?" Cale picked up a training sword from the weapon rack. "I came to remind you that destroying your own men does not make them loyal. It makes them terrified. Fear works. For a while. Then it breeds resentment. Then rebellion. Then you wake up one morning with a knife in your back and nobody who cares enough to pull it out." Lucien grabbed a sword of his own. "Then what do you suggest?" Cale moved, fast, striking high. Lucien blocked, countered. The 2 men began to circle each other, trading blows with brutal efficiency. "I suggest," Kael said between strikes, "that you stop treating this Luna selection like a death sentence. Pick someone reasonable. Produce an heir. Stabilize the empire. It is not complicated." Lucien laughed, a harsh sound. "Everything about this is complicated. Every candidate in that palace wants power, not partnership. They look at me and see a crown, not a person. Their blades locked, faces inches apart. Then find one who sees both," Kael said quietly. Lucien shoved him backward, broke the lock. "How?" "They all smell the same. Ambition and calculation. Even the ones who pretend to be innocent are just better liars. Maybe your nose is broken." Lucien attacked. Fast. Vicious. Kael defended. Barely. They moved through the sand like twin storms, each blow precise and meant to hurt. The watching guards began to murmur, placing bets, choosing sides. "You think I want to be alone?" Lucien's voice cracked around the edges. "You think I enjoy this? Every morning I wake up and the first thing I feel is rage. Not at my enemies, at myself. For being stupid enough to believe I could hold this empire together through sheer force of will. For thinking that if I just worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, bled enough, it would be worth something." "It is worth something," Kael said. "You have kept this kingdom from tearing itself apart. By becoming the thing everyone fears," Lucien spat. "By turning myself into a weapon, and now they want me to pretend I can be anything else. They want me to choose some noble daughter and smile for the wedding portraits and produce heirs like I am stud livestock. As if I can just flip a switch and become the kind of man who is capable of love." You are capable of it, Kyle said. You are just terrified it will destroy you.
Their swords clashed. Again. Again. The sound echoed through the arena like funeral bells. My father loved my mother, Lucian said. Each word came out between strikes. And when she died, his love turned into madness. He burned cities, executed advisors, started wars based on fever dreams and paranoia. I watched him transform from a decent man into a nightmare. And you know what the worst part was? What? He never stopped loving her, even when he was drowning in innocent blood, even when I put my blade through his heart. His last words were her name, Kael. Love did not save him. It destroyed him. It destroyed everyone around him. And I will not let that happen to me. So you choose nothing instead, Kael said. You choose to be alone because it feels safer. But isolation is not safety. It is just a slower way to die. The fight ended when Kael disarmed Lucian with a move too fast to follow. The king's sword clattered into the sand. Both men stood there, breathing hard, covered in sweat and minor cuts. You are not invincible, Kael said. Stop acting like you have to be. Lucian wiped blood from his split lip. If I am not invincible, then what am I? Human. Lucian looked at him for a long moment, then laughed. A sound like something breaking. That is the problem, brother. Humans do not survive what is coming. He turned and walked toward the exit. Alone. Fists still clenched, and above them, hidden in the shadows of the upper gallery, Serafina watched. She had pressed herself against the stone wall when the fight started, invisible in the darkness. She had not meant to spy, but once she saw them, she could not look away. She had never seen anything like this. Two alphas fighting not to kill, but to communicate. Violence as language. Every strike was a word. Every block was a response. But more than that, she had seen something nobody else was supposed to see. The king was broken. Not weak. Not cowardly. Broken. And he wore that brokenness like armor because he believed it made him stronger. Serafina understood that. She had done the same thing after her father died, wrapped herself in anger and called it protection, refused to grieve because grief felt like weakness. It took her 2 years to realize that refusing to feel pain does not make you strong. It just makes you numb. She watched Lucienne disappear into the tunnels, and something twisted in her chest. Not pity. Something more complicated. Recognition. She knew what it looked like when someone was drowning and refused to ask for help, because she had been that person, and part of her still was. Serafina returned to her chamber that night and did not sleep. She sat by the narrow window watching moonlight paint silver patterns across the capital city. Somewhere out there, the king was alone in chambers too large and too empty, convincing himself that isolation was the same as strength. She thought about what Celestine had said. Go home. Save yourself the humiliation. She thought about what Kael had said to Lucienne. Find someone who sees both the crown and the person. And she thought about her own wolf, the way it had surged inside her when Lucian stood close, not with fear, with certainty. Mate, her wolf had never been wrong, but wolves do not understand politics. They do not understand kingdoms or crowns or the 1,000 ways that power corrupts everything it touches. They only understand truth, and the truth was simple. Serafina had 2 choices. She could leave, return to the forest, live a quiet life, and wonder for the rest of her days what might have happened if she had been brave enough to stay. Or she could fight, not for the crown, not for status or political power or any of the things these noble daughters wanted. For him, for the broken king who believed he had to be a monster to survive, for the man underneath the armor who was so terrified of becoming his father that he refused to become anyone at all. It was stupid, reckless, the kind of decision that gets people killed. But Serafina had learned something the night her wolf emerged. Power does not come from being safe. It comes from being willing to burn for what you believe in. She stood from the window, stripped off her dress, let her wolf rise. The transformation hurt. It always hurt. Bones breaking and reforming, skin splitting to make room for fur. Every cell in her body rewriting itself into something other. But when it was done, she stood on 4 legs instead of 2. Her wolf was massive, larger than any normal she-wolf, red as burning wine, eyes like molten gold. She looked at herself in the small mirror hanging on the wall and saw what others saw when they looked at her.
Unnatural, dangerous, other, good. Let them see danger. Let them see something they could not control or predict or manipulate. Because the game these nobles were playing, fighting over scraps of power using seduction and politics as weapons, that was not her game. Her game was survival, and she was very, very good at it. The selection ceremony happened on the first night of the full moon. The throne room transformed into something from a nightmare dressed as a fairy tale. Chandeliers blazed with captured starlight. Gold-threaded banners hung from vaulted ceilings painted with scenes of ancient battles. Nobles packed the balconies in waves of silk and jewelry and barely concealed contempt. Musicians played songs that sounded like triumph and sorrow had a child together. 53 Luna candidates stood in a semicircle before the throne, each one more beautiful than the last, each one radiating power and breeding and calculated perfection. They wore gowns that cost more than villages, hair styled by professionals, makeup applied with precision. They smelled like expensive perfume and ambition. Serafina stood near the end of the line in a borrowed dress that did not quite fit. Midnight blue. Simple. No jewelry. Her hair pulled back in a braid that exposed the scar on her left temple where her father's blade had cut her during training when she was 12. She looked like a shadow among stars, which was fine. She had not come here to win a beauty contest. The doors at the far end of the throne room opened. Everyone turned. Lucien entered last. The room fell silent. That particular silence that happens when apex predators enter a space. The kind of silence built from respect and terror in equal measure. He wore black. Always black. But tonight the fabric looked like liquid darkness moving over his frame. His crown sat heavy on his head. Silver thorns twisted into brutal beauty. His eyes swept the assembled candidates without warmth, without hope. Just cold assessment. Lord Varric stood beside the throne, chest puffed out like a rooster claiming credit for sunrise. He held a ceremonial scroll and read from it in his formal voice. By the ancient laws of Pack and Empire, tonight King Lucien Vaidrake will select his Luna from among the gathered candidates. This bond will be recognized by all houses. Witnessed by moon and blood. Sealed by... Lucien held up one hand. Varric stopped talking. The king stepped forward. "Let me be clear," he said. His voice carried to every corner of the massive chamber without needing to shout. "I'm not here to play games. I'm not interested in political theater. Whichever woman I choose will stand beside me during the worst war this empire has ever seen. She will be targeted, hunted, used as a weapon against me. If that terrifies you, leave now." Nobody moved. Of course not. Cowards do not come to selections. Only predators. Lucien began walking down the line. Slowly. His gaze moved over each candidate, reading, searching, finding nothing. He stopped in front of a girl with hair like spun gold. "Lady Isadora, your family controls the eastern trade routes." Isadora smiled. "Practiced." "Perfect." "We do, Your Majesty. And we would be honored to..." Lucien moved on. He passed another candidate, then another. Each one received the same treatment, a glance, a dismissal, no explanation. The watching nobles began to whisper. This was not how selections usually went. Typically there was ritual, conversation, some pretense of courtship. Lucien was treating it like a military inspection. He stopped in front of Celestine Mordain. She stood like a statue carved from ambition itself. Red dress that looked like it had been painted onto her body. Red lips, eyes that promised everything and meant none of it. "Lady Celestine," Lucien said, "your father believes you would make an excellent queen." Celestine smiled. A wolf's smile. "My father believes many things, Your Majesty. I believe only in strength." "What kind of strength?" "The kind that does not flinch when hard choices need to be made. The kind that understands that empires are not built on kindness. They are built on will." Lucien studied her, his expression unreadable. "And if I asked you to prove that strength?" Celestine stepped closer, close enough that her scent wrapped around him, close enough that everyone watching understood the implication. "I would do whatever my king required, without hesitation, without regret." The throne room held its breath. Lucien nodded slowly, then moved on. He passed 20 more candidates, 30, 40. His expression grew darker with each rejection. Frustrated, exhausted, looking for something that did not exist. Then he reached Seraphina and stopped. The entire throne room held its breath. Lucian stood 3 feet away from her. His scent hit her like a physical force. Smoke and steel and something wild underneath. Something that made her wolf surge upward inside her chest, sudden and violent and certain. Mate. The word exploded through her mind. Not a thought, a command, an absolute truth that rewrote reality. Her wolf had never been wrong. Lucian's eyes widened, just slightly, barely noticeable unless you were watching for it. But Seraphina saw. She saw the recognition flash across his face, saw his breathing change, faster, shallow, like a man who had just been told his execution date. The mate bond snapped into place like a collar made of fate. For 3 heartbeats, neither of them moved. The world narrowed to just this. Him. Her. The invisible thread connecting them that hummed with power neither of them asked for. Lucian opened his mouth. Seraphina braced herself. You are too weak. The words landed like stones in deep water. Seraphina stared at him. What? Lucian's expression did not change. Flat, dead, final. You triggered your wolf 3 months ago. You have no formal training, no political experience, no defensive skills. You would be dead within a week of standing beside me. I reject this bond. The throne room exploded into noise. Shocked gasps, delighted whispers, nobles leaning over balconies for a better view of the humiliation. Varric, looking triumphant. Celestine's smile sharp enough to cut glass. Seraphina could not breathe, could not think. Her wolf howled inside her chest, tearing at her ribs, screaming. This was their mate. This was supposed to be inevitable. But Lucian had just looked at her like she was a problem to be solved, an inconvenience, a liability. He turned away. That was when something inside Seraphina cracked. Not broke. Cracked. The kind of damage that lets light through. She heard herself speak, her voice cut through the chaos like a knife. You are a coward. The room went silent. That particular kind of horrified silence that happens when someone commits social suicide in real time. Nobody spoke to the Alpha King that way. Nobody. Lucian turned back slowly. The movement was controlled, deliberate. His eyes were black, pure alpha dominance radiating from him in waves that made weaker wolves drop to their knees. Around the throne room, several candidates collapsed. Guards went rigid. Even some of the nobles on the balconies swayed. What did you say? His voice dropped to something barely above a whisper, more dangerous than shouting. Seraphina stepped forward. Her wolf surged. She felt power flooding her veins, ancient, undeniable. Red light began to glow beneath her skin like embers waiting to ignite. You heard me, she said. Each word sharp as broken glass. You stand here pretending you reject me for my own safety. But really, you are just terrified. Terrified that caring about someone might make you vulnerable. So you wrap yourself in duty and call it strength. But it is not strength. It is fear. The watching nobles gasped. This was beyond insult. This was treason. Lucian moved. One moment he stood 10 feet away. The next he was inches from her face. His hand gripped her throat. Not squeezing, just holding. A promise wrapped in flesh. Careful, girl. I have killed for less. Seraphina looked into his eyes, saw the rage, saw the pain underneath, saw everything he was trying so desperately to hide from the world. Then kill me, she whispered. Her voice steady despite the hand on her throat. Because living without your mate, that is worse than dying, and we both know it. For 3 seconds, neither of them moved. The entire empire watched. Lucian's hand trembled against her skin, just slightly, barely noticeable, but she felt it. Felt the war happening inside him, between what he wanted and what he believed he had to do. His hand dropped. He stepped back, his expression unreadable, shattered. I choose Lady Celestine Mordaunt, he announced. His voice carried across the throne room like a funeral bell. She will be my Luna. We will formalize the bond tomorrow night under the full moon. This selection is ended. Celestine smiled, triumph written across every perfect feature. The nobles erupted in applause, and Seraphina stood there in a borrowed dress that did not fit, while the world congratulated her fated mate on choosing someone else. She felt something inside her die, not her wolf. That still raged and clawed and refused to accept this reality. Something else. Something that had believed, just for a moment, that fate might actually give her something good. Lucien turned and walked toward the throne, every step perfectly measured, perfectly controlled. A man wearing his own execution like formal armor. Guards moved through the crowd, ushering candidates toward the exits. The ceremony was over. Decisions had been made. Serafina did not move. She stood frozen in that spot, watching the king sit on his throne beside his chosen Luna, and realized with terrible clarity what was about to happen. The mate bond does not disappear just because you reject it. It transforms, becomes twisted, poisonous, a constant ache that never heals. She would spend the rest of her life feeling him, knowing where he was, sensing his emotions like phantom limbs, and he would feel her too. They would be chained together by something neither of them wanted, a living torture that only death could end. Cale Arden appeared at her elbow. His voice was quiet, gentle even. You need to leave, now, before this gets worse. Serafina looked at him. How does it get worse than this? Cale's expression was grim. Trust me, it does. He guided her toward the exit. She walked like a ghost, numb, aware of eyes tracking her movement, whispers following in her wake. The forest girl who dared to challenge a king, the nobody who thought she deserved a crown, the fool who believed in fate. As they reached the doors, Serafina looked back one final time. Lucien sat on his throne, Celestine beside him, looking like the perfect royal couple, powerful, united, inevitable. But his eyes found hers across the crowded room, and in that moment, she saw the truth written in his expression. He hated himself more than she ever could. The doors closed. Thunder cracked across the capital. And somewhere in the forest beyond the Empire's borders, something ancient and patient and hungry felt the mate bond shatter and began to smile. Because broken bonds leak power. And Malachar Thorn had been waiting for exactly this moment. Kael guided Serafina through corridors that seemed to close in with every step. The palace had transformed from monument to prison in the span of a single rejection. Guards watched them pass with expressions caught between pity and contempt. Servants whispered behind hands. The air itself felt heavier, like breathing through wet cloth. They reached her chamber. The converted storage room with its narrow window and mildewed bed suddenly looked less like temporary accommodation and more like a cell. Cale stopped at the threshold. His voice was quiet. Careful. Pack your things. Be gone before sunrise. Serafina turned to face him, her jaw tight. I am not running. This is not running. This is surviving. There is a difference. Is there? She felt her wolf stirring beneath her skin. Angry, restless. Rejected bonds do not heal, Commander. They fester. You know that. He knows that. And yet he stood in front of his entire court and chose politics over fate. Kael's expression hardened. He chose survival over sentiment. The king has enemies who would use you as a weapon against him. Malachar Thorn is not just burning territories. He is hunting Luna candidates, killing them, leaving their bodies displayed like warnings. Lucien rejected you to keep you alive. Serafina laughed, a sound like glass breaking. How noble, how utterly convenient that his sense of duty aligns perfectly with his fear of vulnerability. Cale stepped into the room, closed the door behind him. When he spoke again, his voice carried an edge she had not heard before. You think you understand him because you saw him vulnerable for 10 seconds in a throne room. You do not. I have fought beside that man for 12 years. I have watched him make decisions that would break lesser rulers. He is not afraid of vulnerability. He is terrified of becoming his father. What does that mean? It means his father loved his mother so completely that when she died, he went insane. Started executing advisors based on paranoid delusions, burned villages because he dreamed they were hiding assassins, launched wars that served no strategic purpose except to give his grief somewhere to go. Kael's eyes were hard. Lucien was 17 when he put a blade through his father's heart to stop the madness. 17. And you stand here judging him for refusing to risk that same fate. The words landed like stones. Serafina felt something shift in her chest. Not sympathy exactly. Understanding.
That does not make what he did right, she said quietly. No, but it makes it human. Kale moved toward the door. Be gone by sunrise. That is not a request. He left. Serafina stood alone in that tiny room, listening to thunder roll across the capital. Rain began to fall. Heavy drops that sounded like judgment against the window. She should leave, pack her single bag and disappear into the night like a ghost who never mattered. But her wolf refused. The bond hummed beneath her skin, a thread connecting her to Lucien despite his rejection. She could feel him even now, several floors above, alone in chambers too large, drowning in the consequences of his own choices. And beneath that connection, something else. Power. Her bloodline carried something ancient. Lady Oriana had said so. Her transformation had been unlike anything seen in generations. Red wolf, red light. The forest itself had recognized something in her blood. What if that power was not a curse? What if it was exactly what a broken empire needed? Serafina walked to the window, looked out at the storm, made a decision that would either save her or destroy her. She was not leaving, but she was not staying to win the king's heart either. She was staying to become dangerous enough that rejection no longer mattered. Because the only thing more powerful than a chosen Luna is a rejected one who refuses to disappear. Shatyai. Lucien stood in his chambers staring at his reflection in a mirror that had witnessed 3 generations of kings and found all of them wanting. Blood on his collar, not his, someone else's. He could not remember whose. The selection ceremony had blurred into a sequence of moments that felt more like violence than politics. Her face, that was what he remembered most. Serafina Vale standing before him with red light glowing beneath her skin and her voice cutting through every defense he owned. You are a coward. She was right. He was. The door opened without knocking. Only one person in the empire had that privilege. Kael entered, closed the door, leaned against it with his arms crossed. His expression was carefully neutral, the kind of neutral that meant he was furious but controlling it. Say it, Lucien said without turning from the mirror. You are an idiot. More specific. You rejected your fated mate in front of the entire court to protect her from enemies who will now target her anyway because you made her infamous. Kael's voice was flat, clinical. You chose Celestine Mordaunt, a woman whose father is 3 steps away from open rebellion and whose ambition makes most warlords look humble. And you did all of this while looking like a man attending his own execution. So yes, you are an idiot. Lucien finally turned. His eyes were black. Pure wolf. If I had chosen Serafina, Malachar would have her within a week. You know that. Everyone knows that. Malachar is going to come for her anyway now. The rejection makes her more interesting, not less. A rejected true Luna? That is a prize worth hunting. Then she should leave the capital. She is not leaving. I already tried. Kael pushed off the door, walked to the window, looked out at the storm. That girl has more spine than half your council combined. She is not running, which means she is about to do something spectacularly stupid. Like what? Like trying to prove she deserves to be here. Like training in secret. Like becoming exactly the kind of target you were trying to protect her from being. Lucien felt something cold settle in his chest. You will have her watched. I already assigned a rotation. Kael turned. But you need to understand something. You do not get to reject a mate bond and still control what she does. That is not how this works. You made your choice. Now she gets to make hers. The words hit like a blade between ribs. Lucien wanted to argue, wanted to command, wanted to use his authority to force reality into a shape that did not hurt. But Kael was right. He had given up that right the moment he walked away from her. What do you want me to do? Lucien's voice came out raw. Rough. Take it back? Stand before the court and admit I made a mistake? Tell them their king is so weak he cannot even commit to his own decisions? I want you to stop pretending this was about duty. Kael's tone shifted. Softer, but more dangerous. This was about fear. You saw her, felt the bond, recognized something real in a palace full of lies, and it terrified you so completely you destroyed it before it could destroy you. That is not strategy. That is cowardice. Lucien moved, fast, grabbed Kael by the front of his uniform, slammed him against the wall. His canines extended, a growl building in his chest. Kael did not flinch.
Go ahead, he said quietly. Hit me. It will not change the truth. They stood like that for 3 heartbeats. Alpha dominance against absolute loyalty. Power against principle. Lucien released him, stepped back, ran both hands through his hair until it hurt. I cannot be him, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I cannot become what my father was. Love made him weak, made him irrational, made him dangerous to everyone around him. If I let myself feel that way about her, if I let myself care that much, what happens when something goes wrong? What happens when Malachar uses her against me? What happens when I have to choose between her life and the Empire? Then you make the hard choice, Kael said, like you always do. But at least you will have lived first. At least you will have been human for a few moments before duty crushed it out of you. Lucien looked at his oldest friend, his brother in everything but blood, and felt something crack inside his chest. I do not know how to be anything except this, he admitted. Then learn. Kael moved toward the door. Because the man you are right now, he is not going to survive what is coming. You need something worth fighting for beyond just duty and fear. Otherwise, you are just a weapon waiting for someone to point you in a direction and pull the trigger. He left. Lucien stood alone in chambers that suddenly felt like a tomb. Outside, lightning split the sky. Thunder followed. The storm intensified. And 3 floors below, in a converted storage room, Seraphina Vale made a decision that would change the trajectory of an empire. She was done being weak. Training began before dawn. Seraphina found the arena tunnels using memory and instinct. Descended stone steps worn smooth by centuries of warriors. The underground chamber was empty at this hour, just torches and sand and the ghost of violence that never fully left. She stripped off her dress, stood in the center ring in nothing but a thin shift and her father's training boots. The leather was cracked, worn, but they fit perfectly. Her father had taught her the basics before he died. How to stand, how to move, how to fall without breaking. But those lessons had been for survival, not combat. Defense, not offense. She needed more. Let me out. Her wolf's voice rose from somewhere deep inside. Not words exactly, more like feeling wearing language, ancient and certain and hungry. Seraphina closed her eyes, reached inward, found that place where human ended and something older began. The shift started. Pain exploded through her body, bones breaking, reforming, skin splitting to make room for fur. Every cell rewriting itself from the blueprint up. She had done this a dozen times since her first transformation. It never got easier, but it got faster. Within 30 seconds, she stood on 4 legs instead of 2. Her wolf was massive, easily twice the size of a normal she-wolf. Red coat that looked like burning wine in torchlight. Eyes molten gold, power radiating from her in waves that made the air shimmer. She moved through the sand, testing, learning her own body. Every movement was strength wrapped in grace, predator instinct coded into muscle memory she did not know she possessed. She practiced for 2 hours, shifting, moving, learning the exact point where human thought ended and wolf instinct took over. Then she heard footsteps. Someone descended into the arena. Heavy boots, measured pace. The scent reached her before the figure emerged from shadow. Kael Arden. He stood at the edge of the ring, watching her with an expression that gave away nothing. Dawn light filtered through ventilation shafts above, painting everything in shades of blood and gold. Seraphina shifted back to human. The transformation reversed itself in a cascade of pain and power. She stood there in her shift, breathing hard, covered in sweat and sand. Kael tossed her a towel, then a training tunic and pants. Get dressed. You look like you just fought a war. She caught the clothes. What are you doing here? Watching you make the second most dangerous decision of your life. He moved to the weapon rack, selected 2 practice swords. The first most dangerous was challenging the king in front of his court. This one might actually get you killed. I am not afraid of dying. That is the problem. Kael turned to face her. Fear keeps you careful, keeps you alive. You're operating on rage and wounded pride right now. That makes you reckless. And reckless wolves do not survive long in this palace. Seraphina pulled on the clothes. They fit surprisingly well. Then teach me not to be reckless. Kael studied her for a long moment. Why?
Why stay? You could disappear, live a quiet life somewhere far from this mess. Why throw yourself into a war that is not yours?
It became mine the moment he rejected the bond. She walked into the ring, picked up the second practice sword. You told him isolation is just a slower way to die. The same is true for running. I am done being the girl who lets others decide her worth. Kale smiled. Not the kind of smile that reaches eyes, the kind that acknowledges a worthy opponent. All right, let us see what you have. He attacked, fast, no warning. The practice blade came at her head. Serafina blocked, barely. The impact sent shockwaves up her arm. Kale did not let up. He moved like water made of violence. Each strike was a lesson. Each block was a test. He was not trying to hurt her. He was trying to see if she could learn. They fought for 20 minutes straight. Serafina fell 6 times, got up 7. By the time Kyle called a halt, she was bleeding from a split lip and a cut above her eye. Her arms trembled. Her legs felt like wet rope. Kyle was not even breathing hard. You have instinct, he said. Good balance, fast reflexes. But you fight like someone who is afraid of their own power. You hold back. Why? I do not want to hurt anyone. In war, that sentiment will get you killed. Kale lowered his sword. If you are going to survive in this world, you need to accept something fundamental. Power is not good or evil. It just is. What matters is how you use it. Your wolf is strong. Use that strength. Own it. Stop apologizing for being dangerous. The words settled into her chest like stones in deep water. Kyle moved toward the exit, then stopped, looked back. We train every morning, before dawn. If you are serious about this, be here. If not, stay in your chamber and stop wasting my time. He left. Serafina stood alone in the arena, bleeding, exhausted, alive. For the first time since the rejection, she felt something other than pain, purpose. She was not going to win the king's love. That ship had sailed and sunk and rotted on the ocean floor. But she could become something he could not ignore, something powerful enough to rewrite the rules of the game entirely. Books. 3 weeks passed in a blur of violence and discipline. Serafina trained every morning with Kyle. Sometimes just the two of them. Sometimes other guards joined. She learned how to fight with swords, daggers, bare hands, how to move in wolf form during combat, how to track, how to kill quickly and efficiently when necessary. Her body transformed. Muscle replaced softness. Scars marked her arms and shoulders. She moved differently now, with confidence that came from competence instead of bravado. But more than physical training, Kyle taught her how to think like a warrior. War is not about strength, he told her one morning while she bled from a particularly brutal sparring session. It is about will. The side that refuses to quit wins. Always. You can be weaker, slower, less skilled, but if you are willing to endure more pain than your opponent, you win. The lesson sank deep. Meanwhile, the palace descended further into paranoia. Malakar's attacks intensified. 2 more noble houses fell, entire bloodlines executed. Their Luna candidates vanished without trace. The pattern was unmistakable. He was hunting powerful she-wolves, collecting them for some purpose nobody understood. Lucienne responded by militarizing everything. The capital became an armed fortress. Curfews, checkpoints, mandatory patrols. The palace itself transformed into something resembling a military compound more than a royal residence. And through it all, Serafina watched. She attended court sessions from the back of the throne room where low-ranking attendants stood. She listened to council meetings through ventilation shafts. She learned the palace's rhythms, who had power, who wanted power, who was loyal, and who was just pretending. Celestine Mordain was never far from Lucien's side. The formal bonding ceremony had been delayed due to security concerns, which meant Celestine occupied a strange liminal space, chosen but not sealed. Luna in title, but not in blood. She hated it. Serafina saw the frustration written in every perfect gesture. Celestine had won the selection, claimed the prize, but she could not seal the bond while Lucien kept finding excuses to postpone. Because the mate bond does not disappear just because you ignore it. Serafina could feel him constantly now, a thread connecting them across walls and distance. She knew when he was angry, when he was tired, when he was alone in his chambers staring at walls and wondering if he had made a catastrophic mistake. The connection went both ways.
Sometimes she caught him watching her during court sessions. His expression unreadable, but his scent told the truth, regret and longing and frustration so intense it bordered on rage. They never spoke, not once in 3 weeks. It was its own kind of torture. One morning, Kael stopped her after training. His expression was serious, more serious than usual. "We need to talk." "Not here." He led her through maintenance tunnels to a storage room in the oldest part of the palace. Maps covered one wall. Intelligence reports stacked on a table. This was a war room, secret, hidden from everyone except Kael's most trusted soldiers. 3 guards stood around the table. Veterans, scarred, hard-eyed. Kael gestured to the maps. "We have a problem. Malachar is not attacking randomly. He is targeting specific bloodlines, always noble houses, always families with daughters of Luna age. We thought he was trying to destabilize the empire politically, but intelligence suggests something worse." "What could be worse?" Serafina asked. "Ritual magic." Kael pointed to markings on the map. Every attack site shows evidence of ceremonial preparation. Blood symbols. Specific timing aligned with lunar phases. Ancient texts mention a ritual that requires the blood of 12 Luna candidates with powerful bloodlines. For what purpose? To break the natural hierarchy. Kael's voice was grim. To create something that should not exist. An alpha king without a mate bond. Immune to the weaknesses that come with emotional attachment. Malachar believes the current system is broken. That mate bonds make rulers vulnerable. He wants to rewrite the fundamental laws governing our species. Serafina felt cold settle in her stomach. How many Luna candidates has he taken? 11. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. "He needs 1 more, one of the guards said. "Someone powerful enough to complete the ritual. Someone with a bloodline rare enough to act as the final catalyst." They all looked at Serafina. Understanding hit her like a physical blow. The Red Wolf. The ancient bloodline. The power she did not fully understand or control. She was not just another candidate, she was the target. Kael's expression was stone. "Lucian knows. That is why he rejected you. He thought if you were publicly dismissed, Malachar would lose interest. Focus on another candidate. But we have received intelligence that suggests the opposite. The rejection made you more valuable, proof that even fate itself bends to power." "So what do?" Serafina asked. "We use you as bait," Kael said. "We leak information that you will be traveling to House Ashwin Estates next week. Malachar will send forces to intercept. We ambush the ambush, capture one of his commanders, extract information about his location and plans. You want to use me as bait for a trap that might get me killed." "Yes." "And the king approved this plan?" "The king does not know about this plan." Kael's eyes were hard. If he knew, he would forbid it. Lock you in the palace. Surround you with guards. Make you a prisoner in the name of safety. That is not protection. That is paralysis. Serafina looked at the maps, at the attack sites, at the faces of the Luna candidates who had been taken. Young women who looked like her, powerful, proud, now dead or worse. "When do we leave?" she asked. 3 days. Kael handed her a knife. Better quality than the training blades, real steel, sharp enough to cut bone. "You will ride with a small escort, enough guards to look legitimate, but not so many that Malachar suspects a trap. When they attack, you do not run. You fight, draw them in, give us time to close the net. What if something goes wrong? Then you die." Kael's voice was flat. "That is the reality. This is war. People die. Sometimes the brave ones die first, but at least they die on their feet instead of cowering in corners waiting for monsters to find them." Serafina took the knife, tested its weight. It felt good in her hand, deadly, real. She thought about the last 3 weeks, the training, the pain, the slow transformation from victim into weapon. This was why. Not to win love or status or political power. To become dangerous enough that when monsters came hunting, they would regret it. "I will do it," she said. Kael nodded. "Good. Now get out of here before someone sees you. And do not tell anyone about this. Not your friends, not family, no one. Loose lips end with your throat cut in an alley." Serafina left through the tunnels, emerged into morning light that felt too bright, too normal.
The palace continued its daily rhythms around her. Servants carrying linens, guards changing shifts, nobles gossiping in corridors. None of them knew. In 3 days, she would ride out of the capital into an ambush designed to either capture the empire's greatest enemy or get her killed. And somewhere above, in chambers she had never seen, Lucien Vaydrake stared at reports he did not want to read and felt the mate bond hum with anticipation he could not explain. Because some part of him knew, even without being told. His rejected mate was about to do something that would force him to make a choice he had been avoiding since the moment he walked away from her. Stay behind his walls and let her face danger alone, or break every promise he made to himself and fight for her. The night before departure, Serafina could not sleep. She lay in her narrow bed, listening to rain against the window and thinking about all the ways tomorrow could go wrong. Malachar could send more forces than expected. The trap could fail. She could be taken, killed. Worse. But beneath the fear, something else. Excitement. Not the good kind. The dangerous kind. The kind that comes from finally having purpose. Finally being more than just a rejected mate hiding in shadows. A knock at her door. Serafina sat up, reached for the knife under her pillow. Who is it? Silence. Then a voice. Quiet. Raw. Familiar. Let me in. Lucien. Her heart stopped, then started again too fast. She should tell him to leave, should maintain the distance that made survival possible. Instead, she opened the door. He stood in the hallway wearing civilian clothes. Dark shirt, plain pants, no crown, no royal bearing, just a man who looked like he had not slept in weeks. They stared at each other. The mate bond surged. Physical. Undeniable. Her wolf rose inside her chest, desperate and certain. Mate. Mate. Mate! What do you want? Her voice came out harder than intended. Lucien stepped into the room, closed the door behind him. I know about the plan. Kyle thinks he is being clever. Thinks I am too distracted by Celestine and council meetings to notice when my best warriors start planning off-book operations. He is wrong. So you came to stop me? No. Lucien moved closer. I came to tell you that if you do this, if you walk into that trap, I cannot protect you. The political cost of sending royal forces to rescue a rejected candidate would destroy what little authority I have left with the council. Then why are you here? Because. He stopped, one step away, close enough that his scent wrapped around her, close enough that she could see the cracks in his armor. Because I need you to understand that rejecting you was the hardest thing I have ever done. And I have done terrible things. I have killed men begging for mercy, burned cities, made decisions that haunt me every time I close my eyes. But walking away from you? That was worse than all of it. The words hung between them like broken glass. Serafina felt tears burn behind her eyes, refused to let them fall. If it was so hard, why did you do it? Because my father loved my mother so much it destroyed him when she died. Lucien's voice cracked. Because I watched love turn into madness. Because I'm terrified that if I let myself care about you the way every instinct is screaming at me to care, I will become the monster I spent my entire life trying not to be. So you chose to be a different kind of monster instead, Serafina said. The kind that hurts people to keep them safe. The kind that calls cowardice duty. Lucien flinched, as if she had struck him. You want to know what I think? Serafina stepped closer, closing the distance he tried to maintain. I think you are so afraid of your father's ghost that you refuse to be human at all. You built walls so high nobody can reach you, and then you stand on top of those walls alone and wonder why you feel empty. I am empty, Lucien said quietly. I have been for years. Long before I met you. The crown hollowed me out. Duty, responsibility, the weight of thousands of lives depended on my ability to make cold decisions. There is nothing left inside me except will and violence and the absolute certainty that I cannot afford to be weak. Serafina reached up, touched his face. He went rigid, as if her hand burned, but he did not pull away. You are not weak for feeling, she whispered. You are weak for running from it. You are weak for believing that isolation is the same as strength. You are weak for standing here in my room at midnight telling me you made the hard choice when really you just made the easy one. Her hand trembled against his skin. Lucien's eyes were black, Wolf fully present. She could feel his control fraying, smell the desperation beneath his carefully maintained composure. "I should leave," he said, his voice rough. "Yes, you should." Neither of them moved. The storm outside intensified. Lightning, thunder, rain like judgment against stone. "If I kiss you right now," Lucian said, "everything becomes more complicated. It is already complicated. It becomes impossible." "Good," Serafina whispered. "I am tired of possible. Possible is for people who play it safe." We stopped being safe the moment fate decided we belonged together. Lucian made a sound low in his throat, half growl, half surrender. Then he kissed her. The world exploded. The mate bond snapped into full activation. Not the half-formed connection they had been living with, the complete bond. Overwhelming, undeniable, every nerve ending lit up like fire. Serafina gasped against his mouth. Her wolf surged. His wolf answered. Power flooded the small room in waves that made the air shimmer. Lucian pulled her closer, desperate, like a man who had been drowning and finally found air. His hands shook against her back. He kissed her like he was trying to memorize every second because he knew it could not last. And it could not. They broke apart, both breathing hard, staring at each other with expressions caught between ecstasy and horror. "This does not change anything," Lucian said. His voice was wrecked. "You still have to do what you are planning. I still have to be king. We still cannot be together." "I know. But now when you go out there tomorrow, when you walk into that ambush, you will know the truth." His hand cupped her face. "I rejected you to protect you, but I never stopped wanting you, never stopped feeling you, never stopped hating myself for making that choice." Serafina leaned into his touch, felt tears finally fall. "Then, do not let me die out there alone. Send forces. Break your own rules. Choose me over your crown just once." Lucian's expression shattered. "I cannot." Then this was goodbye. "Yes." He kissed her once more, soft, final, then turned and walked to the door. He stopped with his hand on the handle, looked back. "For what it is worth," he said quietly, "you were right. I am a coward. But maybe if you survive tomorrow, I can learn to be something better." Then he left. Serafina stood alone in her room with the taste of him still on her lips and the mate bond singing in her chest, and the terrible knowledge that tomorrow she would ride into an ambush designed to either save the Empire or destroy her completely. And somewhere beyond the palace walls, in forests dark and deep and patient, Malachar Thorne felt the mate bond activate fully and smiled. Because rejected bonds that reactivate leak power like open wounds. And he had been waiting for exactly this moment. The final piece was moving into position. Soon, the ritual would be complete. And the world would learn that monsters are not born from darkness. They are created from the choices kings make when cornered. Dawn came wrapped in fog thick enough to drown in. Serafina stood in the palace courtyard watching stable hands prepare horses for a journey that might be her last. 6 mounts. Minimal supplies. The escort was deliberately small, just enough to look legitimate without being so heavily armed it screamed trap. 4 guards accompanied her. Veterans from Kael's personal unit, hard-faced men and women who had survived campaigns that killed half their companies. They checked weapons with the calm efficiency of soldiers who understood that preparation was the only prayer that mattered. Kael emerged from the armory carrying a crossbow. He handed it to Serafina without ceremony. Bolt action. Preloaded. If things go wrong, aim for center mass and pull the trigger. Do not hesitate. Do not negotiate. Just kill. Serafina took the weapon. It felt heavier than it looked. "What if I freeze? Then you die." Kael's expression was stone. Fear is natural. Paralysis is fatal. The difference between warriors and corpses is what you do with that fear. Use it. Let it sharpen your focus, but do not let it stop you from moving. She nodded. Strapped the crossbow to her saddle alongside the knife he had given her weeks earlier. Around them, the palace was waking. Servants moved through corridors. Guards changed shifts. The daily machinery of Empire grinding forward with mechanical precision. Nobody knew. Nobody except the 5 people in this courtyard understood that today was not just another escort mission. It was bait. Trigger. The moment when passive defense transformed into active hunt. A door opened across the courtyard. Lucien emerged. He wore full royal armor, black steel chased with silver, a crown that looked more like a weapon than decoration. His expression was carefully neutral, the king attending to routine business. But his eyes found Serafina immediately. The mate bond flared, raw, undeniable. Every instinct in her body screamed to go to him, to feel his hands on her face again, to taste his mouth and pretend for just one more moment that they were not about to walk in opposite directions toward disasters neither could prevent. Lucien crossed the courtyard, stopped 3 feet away. Close enough that his scent wrapped around her, far enough that propriety was maintained. "Commander Arden," he said, his voice formal, cold. "Is the escort prepared?" "Yes, Your Majesty." Kael's tone matched his. "We depart within the hour." "Good." Lucien's gaze moved to Serafina. His expression did not change, but something flickered behind his eyes. Regret, longing, terror. "Lady Serafina, I trust you will reach House Ashwin safely." It was theater, performance for anyone watching, but underneath the formal words, she heard what he could not say. "Come back alive, please. I cannot survive losing you before I even had the chance to keep you." "I am sure I will be fine, Your Majesty," Serafina said, her voice steady despite her heart trying to break through her ribs. "Your roads are well patrolled, not well enough." The words came out before Lucien could stop them. He caught himself, cleared his throat. "Which is why Commander Arden has assigned his best soldiers to accompany you." Their eyes locked. The world narrowed to just this. Him. Her. The impossible distance between what they wanted and what duty demanded. Lucien turned, walked away. Each step measured, controlled. A king who had already lost everything that mattered and was determined not to show it. Serafina watched him disappear into the palace and felt something inside her chest crack wider. This was insane. Riding into an ambush because Kael thought they could turn predator into prey. Trusting that instinct and training would be enough to survive forces she had never faced. But she had stopped being the girl who waited for others to decide her fate. She had become the weapon, and weapons do not hesitate. "Mount up," Kael ordered. They rode out of the capital as fog turned morning into something from a ghost story. The road to House Ashwin territories wound through forests older than the empire itself. Ancient trees pressed close on both sides. Branches formed canopies so thick that sunlight became rumor. The air smelled like moss and rot and things that had died centuries ago and never fully decomposed. Perfect ambush terrain. Serafina rode in the center of the formation, 2 guards ahead, 2 behind, Kael beside her. They maintained light conversation, weather, trade routes. Nothing that mattered, just sound to fill the oppressive silence. But everyone was listening, waiting for the moment when silence became violence. 3 hours into the journey, Kael raised his fist. The formation stopped. Serafina's heart hammered. Her wolf stirred beneath her skin, ready, eager. "What is it?" she asked quietly. Kael dismounted, crouched, examined the road surface. Fresh tracks. Multiple wolves. They crossed here within the last hour. He looked up. The ambush was supposed to happen at the ravine 2 miles ahead. "This is too early." "Maybe they changed tactics," one of the guards said. A woman named Sira with a scar bisecting her face from temple to jaw. "Or maybe they know we know." Kael stood, drew his sword. "Which means this is not an ambush, it is a slaughter." The forest exploded. Wolves burst from the underbrush on both sides. Massive, feral, eyes that glowed with unnatural light. Not normal pack wolves. Something twisted, enhanced. Rogue soldiers, Malakar's army. The guards reacted instantly. Steel flashed. Crossbows fired. Horses screamed and reared. Serafina felt time slow. Training took over. She drew the crossbow, aimed at the closest wolf, pulled the trigger. The bolt caught it mid-leap, punched through its chest. It hit the ground and did not move. First kill. No time to process. Another wolf came at her from the right. She dropped the crossbow, drew her knife, shifted her weight the way Kael had taught her, used the wolf's momentum against itself. The blade went into its throat. Hot blood sprayed across her hands. Second kill. Around her the guards fought with brutal efficiency. Sira had shifted to wolf form, tore into enemies with savage precision. Another guard named Marcus fought with twin blades, spinning, cutting, turning the road into an abattoir, but there were too many. For every rogue that fell, 2 more emerged from the forest. This was not an ambush. This was extermination. Kael fought his way to Seraphina's side. His armor was painted red. His sword dripped. Run. Now. Head for the ravine. There is a cave system. You can lose them in the tunnels. What about you? We will hold them here. Buy you time. Go. I am not leaving you to die. You do not have a choice. Kael grabbed her arm. His grip was iron. This was always the risk. We knew it. Now move before I have to watch you die too. A rogue wolf slammed into Kael from behind. They went down in a tangle of limbs and teeth. Seraphina screamed, started toward them. Sira intercepted her, shifted back to human long enough to shout, "Go! We have him! Run!" Then Sira dove back into the melee. Seraphina ran, crashed through underbrush, branches tore at her face. Behind her, sounds of battle, screaming, dying, the wet sounds of flesh being torn. She ran until her lungs burned, until her legs felt like they would collapse, until the sounds of battle faded into horrible silence. She reached the ravine. A cliff face dropped 200 feet to rocks and river below. A narrow path wound along the edge. Treacherous. Deadly if you slipped. And emerging from the tree line ahead, cutting off her escape, was a figure she recognized from intelligence reports. Malachar Thorne. He stood like something carved from nightmare. Tall, broad, scars covering visible skin in ritual patterns. His eyes were amber shot through with black. Wolf barely contained beneath human skin. He smiled. Not the cruel smile of a villain, the satisfied smile of a hunter who had just cornered exactly the prey he wanted. "Seraphina Vale," he said. His voice was surprisingly cultured, refined. The rejected Luna with the red wolf. "I have been looking forward to meeting you." Seraphina drew her knife, breathing hard, back toward the cliff edge. "Stay away from me." "Or what? You will fight?" Malachar laughed. "Please do. I enjoy watching prey pretend they have fangs. I am not prey. Everyone is prey to someone. That is the fundamental truth your precious king refuses to accept. The strong devour the weak. Power is the only honest currency. Everything else is decoration. If you believe that, why do you need me?" Seraphina adjusted her grip on the knife. You have armies, territory, resources. What does one rejected Luna give you? Completion. Malachar began walking toward her, slow, deliberate, like he had all the time in the world. "Your bloodline is ancient, powerful, pure, the kind that appears once in a generation. Combined with the 11 other Luna candidates I have collected, your blood will fuel a ritual that rewrites the natural law governing our species." The ritual Kael mentioned. Seraphina's mind raced. What does it do? Breaks the mate bond requirement. Malachar's expression was zealous, fanatical. For millennia, Alpha Kings have been shackled by biological imperative. Love makes them weak, compassionate, human. I will create a new kind of ruler, one who feels nothing except ambition, who cannot be manipulated through attachment, who will lead our species into a future built on strength rather than sentiment. You want to create monsters. I want to create gods. Malachar stopped 10 feet away. And you, Seraphina Vale, are the final ingredient. Seraphina's wolf surged. Power flooded her system. Red light began to glow beneath her skin. I am not an ingredient. Her voice came out doubled. Human and wolf speaking simultaneously. I am a weapon, and weapons break the hands that try to wield them. She shifted. The transformation happened faster than ever before. One moment human, the next, a massive red wolf standing between Malachar and escape. She attacked, fast, vicious, going for his throat. Malachar shifted to meet her. They collided in midair, two apex predators tearing at each other with everything they had. Claws, teeth, pure primal fury. But Malachar was older, stronger, enhanced by dark rituals she did not understand. He threw her off. She hit the ground hard, ribs cracked, pain exploded through her side. She scrambled to her feet, limping now. Malachar circled. You fight well for an untrained pup, but courage without skill is just suicide with style. He attacked again. This time Serafina could not dodge. His jaws closed around her shoulder. Bone grinding. Agony. She howled, used the pain, let it fuel her wolf, twisted in his grip, raked claws across his eyes. Malachar released her with a roar. Serafina hit the ground, shifted back to human, blood pouring from the wound in her shoulder. She could not feel her left arm. Malachar shifted back too, blood streaming from deep gouges across his face. He touched his ruined eye and laughed. Impressive. You are more dangerous than intelligence suggested. Good. The ritual requires strong blood. Weak candidates produce weak results. He moved toward her. Serafina backed up. Her heel found empty air. The cliff edge. No more room to run. Malachar grabbed her throat, lifted her off the ground with one hand. You should have stayed in your forest, little Luna, should have accepted your place. Now you die as fuel for a better world. He pulled back his other hand, claws extended, preparing to strike. Then an arrow sprouted from his shoulder. Malachar dropped her, spun. Figures emerged from the tree line, not guards, not Kael's soldiers. The royal army, 50 warriors in full battle formation, led by a figure in black armor who moved like controlled violence given form. Lucien Vaidrake. The king had come. Malachar's expression shifted. Surprise, then rage, then something that looked almost like respect. You broke your own rules, King Lucien, sent royal forces to rescue a rejected mate. How wonderfully predictable. Lucien drew his sword. His voice was cold as winter. You touched what is mine. Predictable or not, you are going to regret it. She is not yours. Malachar's laugh was harsh. You rejected her, publicly, humiliated her in front of your entire court. She belongs to no one now. Wrong. The word came from behind Malachar. Kael Arden emerged from the forest, bleeding, limping, but alive, followed by Sira and Marcus and one other guard. Battered, but functional. Kael's eyes were ice. She belongs to herself. That is what you will never understand. Power does not come from domination. It comes from choice. And she chose to fight. Malachar looked around. Surrounded, outnumbered. His rogue forces scattered or dead. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. Then he smiled. This was always a possibility, he said, which is why I prepared alternatives. He raised one hand, made a gesture. The forest erupted with movement. But not wolves, soldiers. Human soldiers in armor bearing the crest of House Mordain, Varric Mordain's private army. And walking at their head, dressed in armor the color of dried blood, was Celestine Mordain herself. She looked at Lucien with an expression caught between triumph and contempt. Hello, my king, she said. Surprised to see me? The pieces fell into place. Betrayal. Celestine had not been Lucien's choice, she had been Malachar's plant. An agent working from inside the palace. Feeding information, sabotaging defenses, preparing the empire for conquest from within. Lucien's face went white, then red, then blank. That particular kind of blank that precedes volcanic rage. You, he said. His voice was barely human. This entire time you were working with him. Celestine smiled. Did you think I actually wanted to be your Luna, share your bed, produce heirs for an empire built on hypocrisy? No, I wanted power, real power, the kind that comes from tearing down broken systems and building something better on the ashes. She gestured to her soldiers. They outnumbered the royal forces 2-1, fresh, well-armed, strategic positioning. Lucien's army was exhausted, spread thin, caught between two forces, a trap within a trap within a trap. Malachar laughed. You see, King Lucien? This is the problem with rulers who believe in honor. You think everyone else plays by the same rules, but the game was rigged from the start. Your council wanted you deposed. I wanted your empire destroyed. Celestine wanted to rule from the shadows. We each used the others. And you? You walked right into it because you were too busy protecting your broken heart to see the knife aimed at your back. Lucien looked at Serafina, then at his soldiers, then at Celestine. Something in his expression changed. Not defeat. Transformation. He had spent his entire life trying not to become his father, trying to rule through cold logic and strategic detachment, believing that emotion made you weak. But standing here, surrounded by betrayal, watching the woman who actually mattered bleed from wounds meant to kill her, He finally understood the truth his father had known all along. Love does not make you weak. It makes you willing to burn the world rather than lose what matters. Lucian raised his sword. His voice carried across the clearing with absolute authority. All royal forces, defensive formation, protect the Luna at all costs. The Luna, not the rejected candidate, not the political liability. The Luna. His soldiers responded instantly. Shields up, blades ready. They formed a circle around Serafina with Lucian at the center. Celestine laughed. How romantic. The king finally finds his spine. Too late. You are outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and out of options. Surrender now, and I promise your death will be quick. Lucian smiled. That particular kind of smile that makes experienced warriors step backward. The kind that says you have miscalculated badly and are about to learn exactly how badly. You are right, he said. I am out of options. Which means I finally get to do what I should have done the moment this started. He shifted. Not to wolf form. To something else. Something that made the air itself ripple with power. Alpha dominance at its absolute peak. The kind of presence that made weaker wolves collapse regardless of allegiance. 20 of Celestine's soldiers dropped immediately, unconscious before they hit the ground. Malakar's eyes widened. Impossible. That level of dominance requires complete unity of purpose. No hesitation, no conflict. You have been drowning in both for months. I was, Lucian said. His voice echoed with power. Until you threatened her. Now I have perfect clarity. He looked at Serafina. I am done being afraid. Done choosing duty over truth. Done pretending that isolation is the same as strength. The mate bond exploded. Not reactivated. Fully manifested. The kind of bond that happens once in generations. Complete synchronization between Alpha and Luna. Serafina gasped. Power flooded her system. Not just her own. His too. Merged. Amplified. Becoming something greater than the sum of parts. Her wounds began to heal. Accelerated regeneration that should not be possible. She stood. Shoulder knitting itself back together. Ribs fusing. Strength returning in waves. She shifted. The red wolf emerged, but different now. Larger, more powerful, wrapped in an aura that made reality bend around her. She and Lucienne stood side by side. King and Luna. Finally united. Finally whole. Malakar stared. For the first time, fear flickered across his face. The prophecy. The true Luna. It was real. It was always real, Kael said. You just assumed prophecies were metaphor. They are not. They are warning labels. Celestine screamed, Kill them! Kill them all! Her soldiers charged. What followed was not a battle. It was a demonstration. Lucian, and Serafina fought as one entity. Where he attacked, she defended. Where she struck, he supported. The mate bond allowed them to move with perfect synchronization. Reading each other's intentions before conscious thought, they tore through Celestine's forces like fire through dry grass. Malakar tried to flee. Kael intercepted him. Their blades met. You do not get to walk away from this. The royal army rallied. Exhaustion forgotten. They pushed forward with renewed fury. Mordane's soldiers began to break, to run, to realize they had chosen the wrong side. Within 15 minutes, it was over. Malakar knelt in the dirt, Kael's blade at his throat. Celestine was surrounded by royal guards, her armor stripped, her face a mask of impotent rage. The clearing fell silent except for labored breathing and the sounds of wounded soldiers. Lucienne shifted back to human, walked to where Celestine knelt, looked down at her with an expression that held no mercy, no forgiveness, just cold finality. You were right about one thing, he said quietly. This empire was built on hypocrisy, kings pretending to be something they were not. But you made a fundamental mistake. You assumed I was too weak to change, too rigid to adapt. You forgot that the most dangerous rulers are not the ones who never break. They are the ones who break and then rebuild themselves into something stronger. He turned to his soldiers. Take her to the capital. She will stand trial for treason, and then she will hang. Celestine spat at his feet. You think this changes anything? The council still wants you gone. Half the empire sees you as a tyrant. Your authority is fiction held together by violence and fear. Lucian smiled. Then I will rebuild it. With her. He looked at Serafina, who was still in wolf form, still radiating power that made the air shimmer. The true Luna. The woman I was too terrified to claim until she proved she did not need claiming. She chose me. And that is worth more than any political alliance you could have offered. He walked to Serafina, knelt, put his hand on her massive head. "Come back," he whispered. "Please. I need to see your eyes when I apologize for being an idiot." Serafina shifted back to human. She stood naked and covered in blood and absolutely magnificent. Lucian took off his cloak, wrapped it around her shoulders, drew her close. "I am sorry," he said, his voice breaking, "for rejecting you, for being a coward, for trying to protect you by pushing you away. For everything." Serafina looked up at him. Her eyes were molten gold. "You are still an idiot." "I know, but you are my idiot." She kissed him. And this time when the mate bond flared, it was not desperation or fear or stolen moments in the dark. It was choice. Complete. Certain. Undeniable. Around them, soldiers began to cheer. Even Kael smiled. For the first time in 10 years, the Alpha King looked like something other than a weapon waiting to be fired. He looked human. And that was when everything truly began to fall apart. Because 50 miles away, in a fortress built from bones and ambition, something that should not exist opened its eyes and smiled. The ritual was not designed to be completed with 12 Luna candidates. That was misdirection. It required only one. The true Luna. And Malachar Thorn had never intended to survive the encounter. He had only needed to make her bleed on consecrated ground, which she had. The prophecy was not a warning. It was an instruction manual. And Serafina Vale had just activated something that would force her to choose between her mate and her soul. Because power always demands payment, and the price for a true Luna was written in blood long before she was born. The ride back to the capital should have felt like victory. It did not. Serafina sat wrapped in Lucien's cloak on a horse that smelled like fear and exhaustion. Around her, the royal army moved in tight formation. Guards on all sides, weapons drawn, eyes scanning the forest for threats that might emerge from shadow. Celestine and Malachar rode in chains, surrounded by soldiers who looked like they would welcome an excuse to execute both prisoners on the spot without trial. But something was wrong. Serafina felt it in her bones. A vibration. A hum. Like reality itself had developed a crack and something was leaking through. The mate bond with Lucien pulsed strong and certain. She could feel him riding ahead, could sense his determination, his relief, his fierce protective instinct that made him check on her every 30 seconds by looking back over his shoulder. But underneath that connection, something else. Something ancient and patient and wrong. Kael rode beside her. His face was carved from stone. He had not spoken since they left the clearing, just stared ahead with the expression of a man calculating odds he did not like. Serafina finally broke the silence. Something happened back there. When I bled on the ground. Kael's jaw tightened. I know. What was it? He did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice was careful, controlled. That clearing was not random. The location, the timing. Malachar led us there deliberately, which means either he is stupider than intelligence suggested, or he wanted to be captured. Why would he want that? I do not know. But men like Malachar do not make mistakes. They make sacrifices. The question is what he sacrificed himself for. The words settled into Serafina's chest like ice. Ahead, the capital appeared through morning fog. Marble towers, fortress walls. The empire that had rejected her and then fought for her and now expected her to be its salvation. They passed through gates that closed behind them with the finality of a trap springing shut. The palace courtyard was chaos. News of the battle had arrived ahead of them. Nobles clustered in anxious groups. Servants whispered behind hands. The Council of Alphas stood on the palace steps, looking like they could not decide whether to celebrate or panic. Lord Varric Mordain was not among them. He had been arrested the moment word reached the capital that his daughter had committed treason. His estate seized, his soldiers disarmed, his name becoming synonymous with betrayal. Lucien dismounted, immediately surrounded by advisors shouting questions and demands. He ignored all of them, walked directly to Serafina, helped her down from her horse with a gentleness that contrasted violently with the hardness in his eyes when he looked at anyone else. You need rest, he said quietly. A healer. Food. Time to process what happened. I need answers. Serafina kept her voice low. Something is wrong. I can feel it. The ritual Malakar mentioned. It did not fail just because we stopped him. Lucien's expression darkened. I know. We will figure it out, together. But first, you need to recover. He turned to Kyle. Get her to the medical wing. Post guards. Nobody enters except vetted healers. And find me every text we have on ancient lunar rituals, especially anything involving blood sacrifice on consecrated ground. Kale nodded. Already moving. But before Serafina could follow, a voice cut through the courtyard noise like a blade through silk. How touching. The rejected Luna returns as conquering hero. Lady Oriana Ashwin stood at the top of the palace steps, ancient, imperious, her eyes sharp enough to cut glass. She descended slowly, each step measured. When she reached Serafina, she stopped, studied her with an intensity that made Serafina want to step backward. Show me, Oriana said. Show you what? Your wolf, now. It was not a request. Serafina looked at Lucian. He nodded slightly. Whatever Oriana wanted, she had earned the right to ask. Serafina stepped back, gave herself space, let her wolf rise. The shift happened smoothly now, practiced. Her red wolf emerged in a cascade of power that made nearby horses shy and soldiers grip weapons tighter. Oriana walked around her, examining. Her expression grew darker with each step. When she finished her inspection, she looked at Lucian. We need to talk. Privately. Now. Her tone left no room for argument. They gathered in the war room. Lucien, Kyle, Oriana, Serafina, still in wolf form because Oriana had insisted she stay shifted. Maps covered the walls. Intelligence reports stacked on tables. This room had coordinated campaigns and planned defenses and calculated the cost of empire in blood and gold. Now it felt like a tomb. Oriana moved to a locked cabinet, removed a book so old the leather binding looked like it might crumble at a touch. She opened it carefully, found a page marked with faded ribbon. The Ritual of Unmaking, she read. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. An ancient ceremony designed to separate Luna essence from mortal form. It requires the blood of a true Luna spilled on ground consecrated by the deaths of 12 previous Luna candidates. The purpose is not to kill the true Luna. It is to transform her. Into what? Lucian's voice was dangerous. Quiet. A vessel. Oriana looked up. Her eyes were haunted. The ritual was created millennia ago by Alpha Kings who wanted to control Luna power without being bound by mate connections. They believed they could extract Luna essence and infuse it into themselves, become both Alpha and Luna. Ultimate power without the weakness of attachment. Serafina felt cold settle into her bones. She shifted back to human, wrapped Lucian's cloak tighter around herself. Are you saying Malakar used me to complete this ritual? Partially. Oriana's finger traced text that looked like it had been written in something darker than ink. The ritual requires 3 stages. First, the blood sacrifice on consecrated ground. That happened when you fought Malakar. Second, the true Luna must fully manifest her power through complete mate bond activation. That happened when you and Lucien finally accepted each other. What is the 3rd stage? Kale asked. The true Luna must face a choice between her mate and her power. Oriana closed the book. The ritual is designed to force separation, to make her choose between love and strength. If she chooses the mate, she loses her Luna essence entirely, becomes human, powerless. If she chooses the power, she loses her humanity, becomes something else, something that will destroy everything she loves because that is what power without anchor does. The room went silent. That particular kind of silence that happens when you realize you have already lost and are just waiting to see how badly. How long? Lucian's voice was barely above a whisper. How long until she has to choose? The text does not specify. But based on the signs, Oriana looked at Serafina with something that might have been pity. I would estimate 3 days, maybe less. You are already changing. Your power is growing exponentially. Soon it will reach a tipping point, and then the choice will be forced. Can we stop it? Reverse it? No. Oriana's tone was final. The ritual is already in motion. The only way to stop it is to kill Malachar before the third stage activates. But based on what you have told me, he anticipated that. He wanted to be captured, which means his death is part of the plan. How does killing him help if he is already dead? Kyle demanded. Because his death will trigger the final stage prematurely. Oriana opened the book again, pointed to a passage. When the ritual architect dies, his soul becomes the catalyst. The choice is forced immediately. No preparation, no time to find alternatives, just the true Luna, her mate, and the decision that will define what kind of world survives. Lucian turned away, faced the wall. His shoulders were rigid, fists clenched. Serafina could feel his rage through the bond. Not at her, at himself, at fate, at the cosmic cruelty that gave them what they wanted and then immediately threatened to take it away. Then we do not kill him, Lucian said. We keep him alive. Forever if necessary. Lock him in the deepest cell, post constant guards, remove any possibility of death. That only delays the inevitable, Oriana said gently. The ritual will complete eventually. Days, weeks, months, but it will complete. And the longer you delay, the more powerful the choice becomes, the more destructive the consequences. Serafina stood, walked to where Lucien faced the wall, put her hand on his back, felt the tension in every muscle. Look at me, she said quietly. Lucien turned. His eyes were black, wolf fully present, on the edge of losing control entirely. We will find another way, he said. Each word came out harsh, desperate. There is always another way. We just have to look harder, think smarter, fight better. Serafina touched his face, forced him to meet her eyes. What if there is not? Then I burn the world until there is. The mate bond flared, raw, absolute. She felt his determination like physical force. He meant every word, would raise nations, slaughter armies, tear reality itself apart if it meant keeping her. That was what love looked like when filtered through a man who had spent his entire life learning how to destroy things. Beautiful, terrifying, inevitableness. But love without wisdom is just another kind of violence. Promise me something, Serafina said, if it comes to the choice. If there is no other way, you will let me make it. Not you, not Kyle, not anyone else. Me. Lucien's jaw worked, like he was physically chewing the words before he could spit them out. I cannot. You have to. If you choose power over us, you will become the thing we are fighting against. If you choose me over power, you lose everything that makes you extraordinary. Either way, I lose you. So no. I will not promise to stand aside while you destroy yourself for a ritual designed by dead tyrants who wanted to control what they could not understand. Then what do you suggest? War. Lucien's voice dropped to something barely human. We kill every person who knew about this ritual. We burn every text that describes it. We hunt down anyone who might be able to activate it, and we erase them from existence. We make the knowledge so lost that reality itself forgets it was ever possible. That will not work. Oriana's voice was sad. The ritual is already active. Destroying knowledge does not stop what has already begun. Then we run. Lucian turned to Serafina. We leave the Empire, take ships to the far continents, find somewhere so remote that magic itself cannot reach us, live quietly, die quietly, let someone else rule, and abandon everyone who depends on you? Serafina shook her head. That is not who you are. You do not run from responsibility, you drown in it. That is both your greatest strength and your fatal flaw. The words landed like stones. Lucien looked at her with an expression that broke her heart. Then tell me what to do. Because I have spent my entire life making hard choices, sacrificing pieces of myself for the greater good, becoming a monster so others could sleep safely. But this? Choosing between keeping you and losing you? I do not know how to do that. I'm not strong enough. Yes, you are. Serafina stepped closer. You are the strongest person I have ever met, not because you do not break, but because you break and keep fighting anyway. You rebuilt yourself after your father, after every war, after every loss. You will rebuild after this too. Not if you are gone. The confession hung between them like a blade. Outside the war room, the palace continued its daily chaos. Empire grinding forward, nobles scheming, soldiers training, the machinery of power that never stopped regardless of individual suffering. Kyle cleared his throat. We should interrogate Malakar, find out exactly what he knows about the ritual timeline. Maybe there are details the ancient texts do not cover. Good idea, Lucian said. His voice was mechanical now. Emotion locked down. The king returning. Prepare an interrogation chamber. Full security. I want truth serums, empaths, every tool we have for extracting information from prisoners who would rather die than talk. He will not talk, Oriana said. Men like that are prepared for torture. Expect it. Welcome it even. Pain confirms their martyrdom narrative. Then we make him comfortable. Lucian's smile was sharp, cruel. We give him everything he wants except the satisfaction of suffering. We bore him into compliance. Kael nodded. I will make arrangements. He left. Oriana gathered her ancient book, moved toward the door, stopped, looked back at Serafina. Your grandmother would be proud of you. She died believing her bloodline was cursed, that power like yours only brought suffering. But you have proven that strength without compassion is just cruelty, and compassion without strength is just weakness. Whatever choice you make it with both. She left. Lucian and Serafina stood alone in the war room, surrounded by maps of territories they might not live to govern. The silence stretched. Finally, Lucian spoke. His voice was raw. If you choose power, if you become something other than who you are now, I need you to know something. What? I will still love you? Whatever you become, however monstrous or terrible or inhuman, I will love you through it. Even if you do not remember me, even if you try to kill me, even if loving you means standing between you and the world you want to destroy, I will be there. Serafina felt tears burn behind her eyes. And if I choose you, if I lose my power and become human, then we will figure out how to rule an empire with nothing but stubbornness and spite. Lucian pulled her close, his arms wrapped around her like he could physically hold her together through sheer will. We have survived worse. Have we? No, but we are going to pretend we have until it becomes true. She laughed, a sound caught between sob and genuine humor. You are insane. I am in love. Same thing. They stood like that for a long time. Two people who had found each other in the worst possible circumstances and refused to let go even when fate itself tried to pry them apart. Outside, thunder rolled across the capital. A storm was coming. And in the deepest cell of the palace dungeon, Malakar Thorne sat in comfortable captivity and smiled, because everything was proceeding exactly as planned. The ritual of unmaking was not designed to separate Luna essence from mortal form. That was the lie written in corrupted texts over centuries. The real ritual did something far worse. It created a choice that had no right answer, a trap disguised as free will. And the true Luna, no matter what she chose, would break, either immediately or slowly. But she would break. And from that breaking, a new kind of power would be born. The kind that does not save worlds, it ends them. Sat. The interrogation chamber was designed for comfort. No torture devices. No chains, no darkness. Just a well-furnished room with soft lighting and a chair that could have belonged in a noble's study. A table held wine and fruit and fresh bread. Everything a prisoner might want except freedom. Malakar sat in the chair looking completely at ease. Lucian stood across from him, arms crossed, expression carved from stone. Kael flanked him on the right, Serafina on the left. They formed a wall of contained violence. You look comfortable, Lucian said. I am. Malakar smiled, poured himself wine. Your hospitality is unexpected. Most rulers would have started with the torture. You offer refreshments. How civilized. I am not most rulers. No. You are a man desperately trying to save something he knows he has already lost. Malakar sipped his wine. Appreciative. Tell me, King Lucian, how does it feel? Finally having what you want? The mate, the power, the complete bond, and knowing it is all temporary, that within days, maybe hours, you will have to watch her choose between being human or becoming a god. We are going to stop the ritual. You cannot stop what is already complete. Malakar's tone was almost sympathetic. The ritual does not have stages that can be interrupted. It is a cascade. Once initiated, it runs to conclusion. The only variable is what that conclusion looks like. Then tell us how to change the conclusion, Kael demanded. You cannot. That is the beauty of it. The ritual was created by Luna priestesses, not Alpha Kings. We just corrupted the translation over centuries to make people think it was a tool for domination. But the truth? It is a test. The universe asking one question. What question? Serafina asked. Can love survive power? Or does power always corrupt what it touches? Silence. Malakar leaned forward. Every true Luna in history has faced this choice. Most chose power, became monsters, destroyed their mates and everyone around them. A few chose love, lost their power, lived quiet lives and died forgotten. None ever found a third option, because there is not one. The test is binary. You are human or you are wolf, mortal or eternal, bound or free. You cannot be both. Why? Serafina's voice was steady despite the cold flooding her system. Why does it have to be binary? Because power demands sacrifice. Always. You cannot have everything. That is the fundamental law. Kings sacrifice their humanity to rule. Warriors sacrifice their peace to fight. Luna candidates sacrifice their freedom to become queens. The ritual just makes that sacrifice explicit, forces you to choose what matters most. And whatever you choose, you lose the other half of yourself. Lucian moved, fast, grabbed Malakar by the throat, lifted him out of the chair, his canines extended, eyes pure black. Tell me how to break it, now. Or I will spend the next month pulling you apart one piece at a time and healing you so we can do it again. Malakar did not struggle, just looked at Lucian with something that might have been pity. You still do not understand. I am not your enemy. I am your mirror. You spent your entire life trying not to become your father, refusing to love because love made him weak. But weakness is not the opposite of strength. It is the cost of it. Your father was not weak for loving. He was weak for not knowing how to survive loss. That is your test. Can you love her and still survive if she chooses to become something you cannot follow? Lucien dropped him. Malakar hit the chair, adjusted his collar, poured more wine like nothing had happened. 3 days, he said. That is how long before the choice is forced. You can spend that time looking for answers that do not exist. Or you can spend it together, saying things that need to be said, preparing for futures neither of you wants. Get out, Lucian said. His voice was dead, flat. Guards, return him to his cell. Double security. Nobody speaks to him. Nobody gives him anything except food and water. And if he tries anything, do not kill him. Just make him regret being alive. Guards entered, escorted Malakar out. The interrogation chamber fell silent. Kael spoke first. He is right about one thing. We have 3 days. We should use them looking for alternatives. Ancient texts, other Luna priestesses, someone who might know more than corrupted translations. Lucien shook his head. We already used that time. Oriana is the foremost expert on Luna history in the Empire. If she says there is no alternative, there is not one. Then what do we do? Kael's frustration was visible now. Just accept it? Wait 3 days and watch her choose between impossible options? No. Lucien turned to Serafina. We do what we should have done from the beginning. We trust her. Whatever choice she makes, we support it. No second guessing, no trying to influence her. She decides. We follow. The words were brave, but Serafina could feel his terror through the mate bond, taste his desperation, sense the enormous effort it took for him to say those words and mean them. I need air, she said. Space to think. Alone. Lucien nodded. Take guards. No guards. Just me. That is not safe. I do not care about safe. I care about 3 days of freedom before I have to choose between being human or becoming a monster. Give me that much. Lucien looked like she had struck him, but he nodded. 3 hours. Then you come back. Or I send the entire army to find you. Deal. She left. Walked through palace corridors that felt like they were closing in, past nobles who whispered, past servants who stared, past guards who looked at her like she was already a ghost. She emerged into the palace gardens. Night had fallen. Stars scattered across sky like broken glass. The moon hung heavy and red. Blood moon. The kind that appeared in old stories before terrible things happened. Serafina walked until she reached the farthest corner of the gardens, a place where ancient trees formed a canopy so thick that moonlight became rumor. She sat on cold stone, pulled her knees to her chest, let herself feel everything she had been holding back. Terror, rage, grief, the crushing weight of a choice that should not exist. She did not want to be human, powerless, vulnerable, watching Lucien fight battles she could not help with, growing old while he remained young, dying while he lived on with the memory of what she used to be. But she did not want to become a monster either, to lose her compassion, her empathy, everything that made her more than just instinct and hunger, to look at Lucien and feel nothing except predator evaluating prey. Both options were death, just different speeds. Footsteps behind her, she turned. Kael emerged from shadow, alone. He looked tired, older than she had ever seen him. He sat beside her without asking permission. For a long moment, neither spoke. "He is going to try to save you," Kael finally said. "You know that, right? The moment the choice is forced, he is going to try to intervene, offer himself instead, do something catastrophically stupid because that is what he does when people he loves are in danger. I know. You need to stop him." "How?" Seraphina's voice broke. "How do I stop someone from trying to save me when that is literally all he knows how to do? By being stronger than him." Kael looked at her. Really looked. "You have become dangerous, powerful, the kind of Luna that appears once in generations. But danger is not the same as strength. Strength is making the hard choice and living with it. Danger is just making others pay for your decisions. What if I do not know which choice is right? Then you pick the one you can survive. Because survival is the only victory that matters. Everything else is poetry written by people who never had to actually fight." The words settled into her chest like stones in deep water. Kael stood, started to leave, stopped, looked back. "For what it is worth," he said quietly, "I think you are going to choose power. Not because you are cruel, but because you understand something Lucien does not. The Empire needs a true Luna more than it needs another Alpha King. We have plenty of those, strong rulers who think violence solves everything. But a Luna who can judge them? Who can force them to be better? That is rare. That is worth losing yourself for." He left. Seraphina sat alone under the blood moon and felt the weight of 3 days pressing down on her like the sky itself. She thought about her father, dead defending borders nobody cared about. She thought about her mother, healer who saved lives and died anyway when sickness came. She thought about every person she had ever known who made sacrifices for things larger than themselves. And she thought about Lucien, the broken king who learned to love despite every instinct screaming that love was weakness. Could she do less? Could she choose safety when he had chosen risk? Could she pick humanity when the world needed something more? The answer crystallized with terrible clarity. No, she could not, which meant the choice was already made. She just had to survive telling him. Seraphina stood, walked back toward the palace. Each step felt heavier than the last. The guards at the entrance looked relieved to see her. One ran ahead, announcing her return, making sure Lucien knew she was safe. She found him in his private chambers, standing at the window, staring out at his empire. He turned when she entered. Relief and fear warred across his face. "I was about to send the army," he said, trying for humor, failing. Seraphina closed the door behind her. "We need to talk. That is never a good way to start a conversation." "No, it is not." She walked to where he stood, took his hands, felt them trembling despite his attempts at control. "I have made my choice," she said. Lucien went rigid. "Do not. You have 3 days. You do not have to decide yet." "Yes, I do. Because waiting just makes it harder. And I need to say this while I still can." His grip tightened on her hands, like he could physically hold her here if he just did not let go. "I am going to choose power," Seraphina said. Each word felt like a stone torn from her chest. "Not because I do not love you, but because I love you enough to become what this empire needs, even if it means losing who I am, even if it means you have to watch me become something you cannot save." Tears ran down Lucien's face. He did not make a sound, did not argue, did not try to change her mind. He just held her hands and broke silently. Because this was what real love looked like, not fighting for someone, but letting them go when they choose a path you cannot follow. And somewhere deep in the palace dungeons, Malachar Thorne felt the ritual accelerate. The choice had been made. Now came the transformation, And the world was about to learn that true Lunas were not created to serve kings. They were created to judge them. And judgment is rarely kind. The transformation began at midnight on the third day. Serafina woke screaming, not from pain, from power. Her body convulsed as ancient magic rewrote her from the cellular level up. Bones shifted, blood burned, every nerve ending lit up like lightning trapped inside flesh. Lucien was there instantly, hands on her face, voice desperate. "Stay with me. Fight it. Please." But fighting was not an option. This was not an attack. It was evolution, violent, inevitable. The kind that species experience over millennia compressed into minutes. Her wolf emerged without conscious command, red fur erupting from skin that split and healed and split again. But this was not the wolf she knew. This was something older, larger, eyes that glowed with light that had no natural source. The chamber exploded with power, windows shattered, furniture splintered, the stone walls themselves cracked under pressure that should not exist in physical reality. Lucien was thrown backward, hit the wall hard enough to leave an impression. He scrambled to his feet, blood running from his temple, staring at what his mate was becoming. Serafina's wolf stood 7 feet at the shoulder, massive beyond reason. Her fur moved like it was made of liquid fire. Ancient symbols glowed beneath the surface, markings that predated written language, the original law carved into flesh. She looked at Lucien, and for a terrible moment, he saw nothing he recognized. No love, no humanity, just predator evaluating whether he was threat or prey. Then her eyes cleared. Recognition flooded back, but changed, filtered through something vast and terrible and completely inhuman. She shifted back to human, stood naked in the wreckage of their chamber, her body marked with the same glowing symbols, power radiating from her in waves that made reality bend. When she spoke, her voice was doubled, human and something else, something that spoke with the authority of eons. "It is done." Lucien approached slowly, hands raised, non-threatening, like approaching a wild animal that might bolt or attack. "Serafina?" She looked at him, really looked, and he saw it. The thing he had been terrified of since the moment Oriana explained the ritual. She was still there, still his mate, still the woman he loved, but she was also something more. A true Luna in full manifestation. The judge. The balance. The force that existed to prevent Alpha Kings from becoming the monsters they were capable of being. "I can feel everything," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Every wolf in the Empire. Every bond. Every pack hierarchy. Every moment of cruelty disguised as strength. Every king who chose domination over duty. I can see it all. Feel it all. And it is so much worse than I thought." Lucien closed the distance, wrapped his cloak around her shoulders. His hands were gentle despite the terror screaming through the mate bond. "Talk to me. Tell me what you need." "Time." Serafina's eyes glowed. "To understand what I have become, to learn how to exist like this without losing myself completely. You will not lose yourself." Lucien pulled her closer. "I will not let you." She laughed, a sound caught between human and something older. "You cannot stop it. Nobody can. This is what the ritual was designed to do. Turn Luna candidates into weapons, into judges, into the thing that stands between rulers and the atrocities they commit when nobody is watching. Then judge me." Lucien's voice was raw. "If that is what you are now, start with me. Tell me every mistake I have made, every person I failed, every moment I chose cruelty over mercy, because if you are going to be a judge, judge the king standing in front of you first." Serafina looked at him, and the mate bond flared with something that felt like grief and love and terrible understanding all tangled together. "You have made so many mistakes," she said softly, "ruled through fear, pushed away everyone who tried to help, became the thing you swore never to be. But you also saved thousands of lives, held an empire together when it should have collapsed, and learned to love despite every instinct telling you love was weakness. That is not something most rulers manage. Is it enough? I do not know yet." The honesty in her voice was brutal. "Ask me again when I have finished becoming whatever this is." The palace erupted into chaos. Power like Serafina had just unleashed did not go unnoticed. Wolves throughout the capital felt it. Some collapsed, Others howled. All of them recognized on a primal level that something fundamental had changed. Kyle burst through the broken door, sword drawn, stopped when he saw them. His expression cycled through shock, understanding, and grim acceptance in 3 seconds. "It happened," he said. "It was not a question." "Yes." Lucian did not take his eyes off Serafina. "Alert the council. Tell them the true Luna has manifested. And prepare the throne room. We are going to need witnesses." "For what?" "Judgment." The word hung in the air like a blade. Kale nodded. "Left to make arrangements." Serafina looked at Lucien. Her expression was complicated. Layers of emotion fighting for dominance. "You do not have to do this. Make me judge you publicly. That is not how this works."
"Yes, it is." Lucian's jaw was set. "If I am going to ask the Empire to accept you as true Luna, they need to see that I submit to your authority, that even the Alpha King answers to something higher than his own will. Otherwise, you are just another weapon I control. And you are so much more than that. What if I judge you unworthy? What if I see things in you that cannot be forgiven? Then you tell me, and we figure out how to fix them. Together, or apart. Whatever you decide."
The throne room filled with nobles and guards and anyone important enough to demand entrance. The space buzzed with nervous energy, whispers spreading like wildfire. The true Luna had manifested. The ritual was complete. Everything was about to change. Lucien entered first, still wearing armor stained from the battle 3 days ago. His crown sat heavy on his head. He moved through the crowd like controlled violence, took his position on the throne. But he did not sit. He stood beside it, waiting. The doors opened again. Serafina entered. She wore robes that Oriana had provided. Ancient Luna ceremonial dress that had not been worn in 3 generations. White silk marked with the same glowing symbols that covered her skin. Her hair hung loose, red eyes blazing with light that made people look away instinctively. She walked down the center aisle. Every wolf in the throne room felt the weight of her presence. Alpha dominance was power that forced submission. Luna presence was something else. It was judgment, the kind that made you see yourself clearly whether you wanted to or not. Nobles shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away. Others stared with expressions caught between awe and terror. Serafina reached the throne, stopped 3 feet from Lucian. They looked at each other across distance that felt both infinite and non-existent. Lucian knelt. The throne room gasped. The Alpha King, the man who had conquered 5 kingdoms, the ruler who had never bowed to anyone, kneeling before a Luna he had rejected months ago. "Serafina Vale," he said. His voice carried to every corner of the massive chamber. "True Luna of the Northern Empire, I submit myself to your judgment, not because protocol demands it, but because I recognize that power without accountability is just tyranny wearing a crown." The formal words were important, but underneath them, through the mate bond, she felt his real message. "I trust you. Even if you destroy me, even if you decide I am not worth saving, I trust you to make the right choice." Serafina placed her hand on his head. The moment contact was made, power flooded between them, the mate bond fully activated. Not romantic connection, something deeper. She saw everything. Every decision he had made as king, every person he had killed, every mercy he had denied, every moment of cruelty born from fear disguised as strength. But she also saw the context, the impossible choices, the weight of thousands of lives balanced against individual suffering, the slow erosion of humanity that happens when you are responsible for keeping civilization from eating itself. She saw him at 17, blade through his father's heart, tears on his face, knowing he had just killed the man he loved to save the kingdom. She saw him at 20, executing prisoners who begged for mercy because letting them live would destabilize fragile alliances. She saw him at 23, burning villages that harbored enemies because leaving them standing meant more soldiers for armies that wanted him dead. Every choice had been impossible. Every decision had cost him pieces of his soul, and he had made them anyway because that was what rulers did. They sacrificed themselves so others did not have to. That was both noble and horrifying. The truth about power is that it does not corrupt in the way people think. It does not turn good people into monsters overnight. It erodes them. Slowly, decision by decision, sacrifice by sacrifice. until one day they wake up and realize they have become something they do not recognize. Lucien had been eroding for 10 years, but he had never fully broken. That took extraordinary strength, or extraordinary fear, or both. Serafina withdrew her hand. The connection severed. She stepped back. The throne room was silent, waiting. "You have made mistakes," she said. Her voice carried the weight of judgment. "Ruled through fear when wisdom would have served better. Isolated yourself when connection might have saved you. Became so afraid of your father's madness that you denied yourself the humanity that makes leadership worthwhile." Lucien did not move, did not defend himself, just knelt and listened. "But you also held an empire together during impossible circumstances, made hard choices that saved more lives than they cost, and learned to love despite being taught that love was weakness. That is not nothing. That is the difference between a tyrant and a king who is simply exhausted." She paused. "Let the words settle. My judgment is this. You are worthy of the crown, but you need to stop carrying it alone. Delegate. Trust. Allow yourself to be human occasionally. Because an empire built entirely on one person's will is an empire waiting to collapse the moment that person breaks. And you are close to breaking." Lucien looked up. His eyes were wet. "That is your judgment?" I expected harsher. "This is harsh." Serafina's expression was complicated. "I am telling you that everything you have done to survive has brought you to the edge of becoming your father. You are one bad day away from the same madness. The only thing keeping you from falling is me, and that is too much pressure to put on one relationship. You need a counsel you actually trust, advisors who can tell you no, a support structure that does not collapse if I die." Understanding flickered across his face. "You are not just judging me. You are trying to save me. I am trying to save us both. Because true Lunas do not exist to punish kings. We exist to remind them what they are supposed to be. And you, Lucien Vaydrake, are supposed to be better than you have allowed yourself to become." The words landed like stones in deep water. Lucien stood, faced the assembled nobles. "You heard the true Luna's judgment. Effective immediately, we are restructuring the Royal Council. New advisors, new protocols, new accountability measures. If anyone has objections, voice them now." Silence. Nobody was stupid enough to argue with a true Luna in full manifestation. Lucien turned back to Serafina. "And you? What happens to you now?" "I learned how to live like this." She looked at her glowing hands. How to be human and Luna simultaneously. How to judge without becoming cruel. How to love you without losing myself. I do not have answers yet, but I will find them. We will find them. Lucien stepped closer, together. The mate bond flared, not with the desperate intensity of before, with something steadier, deeper, the kind of connection that survives transformation because it was built on more than just attraction or fate. It was built on choice. Two people who decided to fight for each other despite every obstacle, who learned that love is not weakness. It is the hardest kind of strength, the kind that requires being vulnerable in a world that punishes vulnerability. The throne room began to empty, nobles filtering out, guards returning to posts, the machinery of empire grinding forward. Kale approached, looked at them both. His expression was carefully neutral. "So, that happened." Lucien laughed. A genuine sound. "Yes, that happened. How much damage control do we need?" "Less than you think." Kale's mouth twitched. Most people are just relieved the true Luna did not decide to execute everyone and start fresh. Low bar, but we cleared it. "What about Malachar?" Serafina asked. "Still in his cell." Kale's expression darkened. "But we should deal with him, soon, before he finds another way to cause problems." "I will handle it." Serafina's tone was final. "He is my responsibility. The ritual was designed to transform me. He was just the catalyst, which means I owe him an ending, not revenge, just conclusion." Malachar looked up when Serafina entered his cell alone. No guards, no weapons. Just the true Luna in her ceremonial robes marked with symbols that predated his oldest ancestor. He smiled. "You came. I knew you would." "Did you?" Serafina sat across from him. "Why?" "Because you understand now. What I was trying to create.
A world where power is not shackled by sentiment, where rulers can make hard choices without being destroyed by guilt. You were trying to create hell. Serafina's voice was calm. A world without empathy is not strong. It is just cruel. And cruelty for its own sake is not power. It is weakness pretending to be strength. Malakar's smile faded. You truly believe that? I know it. Because I can see inside you now. See everything you have done, every person you killed, every justification you built. And you know what I see underneath all that philosophy and righteous anger? What? A broken child who never learned that being hurt does not give you permission to hurt others. Your kingdom fell. Your family died. And instead of healing, you turned pain into purpose, made it your identity, convinced yourself that if you could not have peace, nobody deserved it. Malakar went rigid. You do not know anything about me. I know everything about you. That is what being a true Luna means. I see the truth underneath the masks people wear, and your truth is simple. You are not a revolutionary. You are not even a villain. You are just sad and angry and so tired of carrying pain alone that you tried to force the world to carry it with you. The words hit like physical blows. Malakar's expression cracked. For the first time since his capture, he looked human, vulnerable, old. What do you want from me? His voice was hoarse. Nothing. Serafina stood. I just wanted you to know that I understand. Understanding is not forgiveness. You will still answer for what you have done. But I wanted you to die knowing that someone saw the person underneath the monster. That is more than you gave any of your victims. She turned toward the door. Wait! Malakar's voice stopped her. The ritual, it did not fail, did it? You became exactly what it was designed to create. A judge. Someone powerful enough to hold kings accountable. Yes. Then maybe I did not lose after all. Serafina looked back. You lost the moment you decided pain was more important than healing. Everything after that was just details. She left. Malakar sat alone in his cell and felt the weight of judgment settle over him like a shroud. Not cruel, not merciful, just accurate. And sometimes accuracy is the harshest sentence of all. Spring came to the empire slowly. Winter had been brutal. War, betrayal, transformation. The kind of season that breaks nations or forges them into something stronger. Velmora was still standing, barely, but standing. The council had been restructured, half the old lords removed, new advisors appointed based on competence rather than bloodline. Oriana served as chief counselor, her age and experience tempering Lucien's instinct to solve everything through force. Celestine Mordain had been executed publicly. Varric died in his cell before trial. Suicide, officially, though rumors suggested otherwise. Nobody mourned them. Malakar Thorn was exiled, stripped of power, sent to the farthest territory with a single guard and orders to live out his days in isolation. Death would have been kinder, but Serafina had decided he needed to live with his choices, really live with them, without armies or purpose or the righteousness that made cruelty feel like duty. The empire learned to function with a true Luna standing beside its king. It was not easy. Nobles who expected rubber stamp approval discovered that Serafina actually read policy proposals and asked uncomfortable questions. Soldiers who thought brutality was strategy found themselves reassigned when she reviewed their records. Some resented her. Many feared her. But slowly, grudgingly, they learned to respect her. Because power that holds itself accountable is rare, and once people see it work, they start demanding it everywhere. Lucien changed too. Not overnight, not dramatically, but in small ways that accumulated into someone recognizably different from the isolated weapon he had been. He laughed more. Delegated tasks he used to insist on controlling personally. Spent evenings in chambers actually resting instead of reading reports until his eyes bled. He learned that strength is not about never needing help. It is about being brave enough to ask for it. And Serafina learned how to be Luna and human simultaneously. The power never left. The symbols still glowed beneath her skin. Her wolf was still massive and terrifying and other. But she found balance, moments of pure humanity, laughter, tears, the simple pleasure of breakfast with Lucien where they talked about nothing important and everything important simultaneously. She learned that judgment without compassion
is just cruelty. And compassion without judgment is just enabling. The balance between them was where wisdom lived. On the first anniversary of her transformation, they stood on the palace balcony watching the capital celebrate a festival that had not been held in 20 years. Music floated up from the streets, laughter, life continuing despite everything trying to end it. Lucian put his arm around her waist, pulled her close. "Do you regret it? Choosing power?" Serafina leaned into him, considered the question honestly. "Sometimes. When I feel myself losing touch with small joys, when the weight of seeing everyone's truth becomes overwhelming, when I wake up and have to remind myself what it feels like to be simply human. But I think I chose right. Because the Empire needed this more than it needed another love story. We have plenty of those. Rulers who chose personal happiness over duty and destroyed everything trying to protect it. What we needed was someone willing to sacrifice happiness for something larger. That is not romantic, but it is real." Lucienne kissed the top of her head. "You are the strongest person I know. I am the most tired person you know. There is a difference. Same thing." They stood in comfortable silence, watching their empire breathe, imperfect, struggling, but alive. Sometimes that is the only victory worth claiming. Not triumph, just survival. The stubborn refusal to let darkness win even when it deserves to. Below them, Kael walked through the festival crowds with Sira, the scarred warrior who had fought beside them. They were not romantic, just two soldiers who understood that some battles never end. You just learn to fight them better. Oriana sat in a garden reading to children who gathered around her like disciples, teaching them history. Real history. The kind that includes mistakes and failures and the slow, difficult work of building civilizations that do not immediately eat themselves. And in the farthest territory, Malachar Thorne sat alone and watched the same stars that shone over the capital. He was not forgiven, not redeemed, just alive, carrying the weight of every choice that led him to exile. That was its own kind of justice. Not the satisfying kind, the accurate kind. The world turns. Empires rise and fall. Kings make decisions that echo through generations. Luna candidates become legends or footnotes, depending on whether history remembers them kindly. But in between the big moments, life happens. Small choices, quiet courage. The decision to be kind when cruelty is easier. To love when isolation is safer. To fight for something larger than yourself even when nobody will remember your name. That is what Serafina learned. That is what Lucienne learned. That power is not about domination. It is about service. And service is not about martyrdom. It is about showing up every day and doing the work even when the work is impossible and exhausting and seemingly endless. Because that is what it means to be worthy of a crown. Not that you never fall, but that you get up. Again, and again, and again, until falling becomes rising and rising becomes who you are. Years would pass. Children would be born. The Empire would face new threats and new challenges and new leaders who brought their own complications. But on this night, in this moment, standing on a balcony overlooking a city that had every reason to be ash and rubble, Lucienne and Serafina were simply alive, bound by choice, changed by power, surviving despite everything. And in a world built on domination and fear and the constant grinding machinery of empire, that was revolutionary. Not because they won, but because they endured, together, separate, human and Luna and everything in between. The strongest rulers are not the ones who dominate everyone around them. They are the ones willing to surrender their pride before losing their soul. That lesson had cost them everything, but standing here now, marked by scars and power and terrible choices, they finally understood its worth. Some battles are won by refusing to fight the way your enemies expect, by choosing vulnerability over armor, connection over isolation, love over fear. That does not mean those choices are easy, or that they solve everything, or that happily ever after looks like the story's promise. It just means they survived. And survival, messy and imperfect and desperately human, is sometimes the only miracle worth believing in. The moon hung red over the Empire. Blood moon. The kind that appeared in old stories before terrible things happened. But this time, the terrible things had already passed. And what remained was not destruction, it was possibility. The chance to build something better from the ashes of what broke. The opportunity to learn from mistakes rather than repeat them. The slim hope that maybe, Just maybe, this generation would be the one that finally figured out how to wield power without being consumed by it. Lucian and Seraphina stood together, King and Luna, Alpha and Judge. Two broken people who found each other in the worst circumstances and refused to let go even when everything said they should. That was not a fairy tale. It was something better. It was true. And truth, however brutal and complicated and exhausting, is always worth fighting for, even when the fight never ends, especially then, because that is what it means to be human, to be powerful, to be worthy of the crown and the burden and the terrible, beautiful responsibility of leading others toward futures nobody can promise, but everyone deserves the chance to find. The festival below continued, music rising, lives intersecting, the empire breathing, imperfect, alive, theirs. And in that moment, that was enough.